The kitchen clock showed 2:47 a.m. when Aurora Evans discovered. The end of her rope came in the form of an empty formula can. She stood at the counter, shaking the container with increasing desperation, willing just one more scoop to materialize. The metallic rattle echoed through her tiny kitchen, a hollow sound that matched the feeling in her chest. Behind her, 6-month-old Rose's cries grew more insistent, each wail, driving another spike of panic through Aurora's exhausted mind. "Please," she whispered to the can, as if prayer alone could fill it. "Just one more feeding. That's all I need." But the container remained stubbornly empty, save for a few powder specks, clinging to the bottom, not even enough to dust the inside of a bottle. Aurora set it down with trembling hands and gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white against the worn laminate. "Think, Aurora. Think." She pulled out her phone, the cracked screen coming to life with a swipe. Her banking app opened to reveal the truth she already knew by heart: $3.67. $3.67 between her daughter and hunger. The numbers blurred as tears threatened, but she blinked them back fiercely. Crying wouldn't feed Rose. The baby's cries escalated, shifting from complaint to genuine distress. Aurora could distinguish every note in her daughter's voice, the difference between tired and hungry, uncomfortable and afraid. This was hunger, pure and simple, and it cut through Aurora like a blade. She opened the refrigerator, knowing what she'd find. A quarter-gallon of milk, but Rose couldn't digest regular milk yet. Half a loaf of bread, a few eggs, some leftover pasta she'd been saving for her own lunch tomorrow. Nothing that would help a 6-month-old baby. The cupboards yielded no miracles either. She'd already checked them twice tonight, as if formula might spontaneously appear between the mismatched dishes and dented cans of vegetables. Her hands shook as she closed the last cabinet door. Rose's cries had taken on a rhythmic quality now. Hungry, hungry, hungry. Each sob an accusation Aurora felt in her bones. What kind of mother couldn't even keep formula in the house? What kind of provider lets things get this desperate? She moved to the living room where Rose lay in her second-hand bouncer, tiny fists waving in the air, face red with frustration. The moment Aurora appeared, the baby's cries intensified, recognizing her. Source of comfort and food. Except tonight, Aurora had no food to give. "I'm so sorry, baby girl," Aurora murmured, lifting Rose into her arms. The familiar weight of her daughter, the sweet baby smell mixed with tears, the way those little fingers immediately grabbed for Aurora's shirt, seeking comfort. It all combined to break something inside her. Standing in her dimly lit living room at 2:47 a.m., holding her hungry child, with $3.67. To her name and no formula in the house, Aurora Evans finally understood what it meant to be completely, utterly desperate. "Thank you for joining me today, and welcome to all my new and returning viewers. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe for more powerful stories that touch the heart. We've all faced desperate moments, but imagine being a single mother with a hungry baby and nowhere to turn. What would you do in Aurora's situation? Would you swallow your pride and ask for help, or try to handle it alone? Comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you'd do in her shoes. Aurora bounced Rose gently, muscle memory taking over even as her mind raced through impossible calculations. 26 years old, and she felt ancient. Every step she took around the small living room carried the weight of choices made and unmade, paths taken and abandoned. "Shh, sweet girl," she whispered against Rose's downy hair. "Mama's going to figure something out. Mama always does. But did she? The evidence suggested otherwise. 6 months ago, she'd believed those same words when she'd held her newborn daughter for the first time, terrified but determined. Back then, she'd had her mother's hand to squeeze, her mother's voice promising everything would work out. "You're stronger than you know, Aurora. We Evans women always are." Except her mother hadn't been strong enough to fight the cancer that took her just 2 weeks after Rose's birth. The timing felt like a cruel joke, given just enough time to meet her granddaughter, to whisper blessings over the baby's head before leaving Aurora truly alone. The medical bills from her mother's final days still sat in a folder on the kitchen table, growing thicker with each passing month. Collection notices mixed with sympathy cards, an absurd combination that somehow perfectly captured Aurora's current existence. Rose's cries softened momentarily, and Aurora took the opportunity to check her phone again. Maybe she'd misread the bank balance. Maybe there was money in savings she'd forgotten about. But the numbers remained unchanged, as final as a verdict. She scrolled through her contacts, thumb hovering over names that might help. Her cousin in Denver, but she'd already borrowed money for the electricity bill last month. Her former co-worker Janet, but Janet had 3 kids of her own. The list of people she hadn't already leaned on grew shorter with each passing week. Then there was the name she never called, the contact she should have deleted months ago, N. Marcus N.B., Rose's father, the man who'd promised her everything under the summer stars, who'd talked about baby names and future plans until the moment the pregnancy test showed positive. Then suddenly, those dreams evaporated like morning mist. And I'm not ready for this, Aurora. I'm only 20 to 8. I've got my whole life ahead of me. As if she'd been ready. As if 26 was the perfect age to be abandoned while pregnant. He'd left town within a week, transferring to his company's Seattle office, blocking her number before he'd even finished packing. The last she'd heard through mutual friends, he was dating someone new. Someone without complications. Someone whose body wasn't changing to accommodate his child. Aurora forced herself to scroll past his name. Even if she could reach him, even if he answered. What would she say? The baby you didn't want is hungry, and I can't afford formula. Her pride might be in tatters, but it wasn't completely dead. She'd managed this long without him. 6 months of doctor's appointments alone, of assembling the crib with YouTube, tutorials, of learning to change diapers at 3 a.m. with no one to take shifts. She'd even gone back to work at the diner when Rose was just 8 weeks old, grateful for Monica's flexibility, but aware that part, time waitressing, barely covered rent, let alone the mountain of everything else. The WIC office had helped with formula initially, but there'd been a paperwork mix, up last week. Something about income verification and missing documents. She'd meant to go back to sort it out, but between work shifts and Rose catching a cold, the days had slipped away. Now it was Sunday night, Monday morning, technically, and the office wouldn't open for hours. And you can't pour from an empty cup, her mother used to say. But what happened when the cup had been empty so long you'd forgotten what fullness felt like? Rose's breathing had shifted to hiccuping sobs, the kind that came after extended crying. Aurora recognized the exhaustion in it. Her daughter was wearing herself out with hunger and frustration. Soon, she'd fall into a fitful sleep, but Aurora knew it wouldn't last. In an hour, maybe 2, Rose would wake again, and the cycle would repeat. I'm going to fix this, Aurora promised, her voice stronger than she felt. I don't know how yet, but I will. You deserve better than this, baby girl. You deserve more than I had. The words hung in the air like a vow, witnessed only by the shadows on the wall and the faint streetlight filtering through threadbare curtains. Somewhere in this sleeping town, there had to be an answer. There had to be help. Aurora just had to be brave enough to find it. With Rose momentarily quieter against her shoulder, Aurora made her way back to the kitchen. She flipped on the light and winced at its harsh glare. The empty formula can stood like an accusation on the counter. Maybe I missed something, she murmured, setting Rose in her bouncer on the kitchen floor. Aurora grabbed the can again and tilted it toward the light. She used her pinky finger to scrape along the inside edges, gathering the finest dust of powder that clung to the metal. It amounted to less than half a teaspoon, nowhere near enough for a proper bottle. Still, she tapped the precious particles into a clean bottle. Her gaze shifted to the sink, where Rose's bottles from earlier sat waiting to be washed. One still had a thin film of formula residue at the bottom. Without allowing herself to think about what she was doing, Aurora added a splash of warm water to it, swirled vigorously, and poured the diluted remnants into the new bottle. The result was pitiful, barely an ounce of extremely watered-down formula. Aurora bit her lip, calculating the nutrition this would provide. Almost none. She'd read enough parenting books to know that diluting formula was discouraged. Babies needed the full concentration for proper nutrition and development. Just for tonight, she whispered to herself. Just to get through until morning. She added more warm water until the bottle was half full. Even in the dim light, she could see how watery it was, more like slightly cloudy water than actual formula. Rose would recognize the difference immediately. The baby's fussing increased again, tiny hands batting at the air. Aurora lifted her, cradling her close. Here, sweetie. Mama made you something. Her voice caught as she offered the bottle. Rose latched eagerly, her eyes fixing on Aurora's face with complete trust. After a few sucks, the baby's expression changed. She pulled away, face scrunching in confusion, then tried again. The hunger drove her to keep trying, but after a moment, she began to cry harder, pushing the bottle away with flailing hands. I know, Aurora soothed, tears welling in her own eyes. It's not right. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. The rejection of the watered, down formula seemed to crystallize everything. Her failure, her inadequacy, her complete inability to provide the most basic necessity for her child. The weight of it crashed down on Aurora all at once. She sank to the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, and pulled Rose tight against her chest. Her own tears fell freely now, mingling with her daughter's. The cold tile beneath her felt appropriate hard, unyielding, much like her circumstances. What are we going to do? She asked the empty kitchen. The walls offered no answers. Rose continued to cry, her little body tense with hunger and exhaustion. Aurora rocked her, humming a broken lullaby through her tears. The clock on the microwave blinked 3:15 a.m., hours until any store would open, hours until she could even think about asking someone for help. Aurora's phone sat on the counter above her. There had to be someone she could reach out to, even at this hour, someone who wouldn't judge her, who might have formula on hand or could loan her enough money to buy some first thing in the morning. Her brother Travis lived 2 hours away. He had a baby of his own, just a few months older than Rose. He might have formula. He would help if he could. He always did when she asked, which was precisely why she hated asking. His family struggled too. Every time she leaned on him, she knew she was taking from his children. But Rose's cries had taken on a hollow quality that Aurora had never heard before. It wasn't just hunger now. It was desolation, confusion as to why her needs weren't being met. Each sob was a tiny indictment. You promised to take care of me. You promised I would never go hungry. Aurora reached up and grabbed her phone. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. Not when Rose's well-being hung in the balance. Tonight, she would have to ask for help. Aurora stared at her phone, Rose's cries echoing through the small house. The screen's harsh glow illuminated her tear-stained face as she scrolled through her contacts. Each name represented a choice, and none of them good. Her finger paused over Travis. Brother. She hadn't called him for money in over a month, not since the electricity bill fiasco. Back then, he'd sent what he could without hesitation, but Aurora had heard the strain in his voice. Travis worked 2 jobs to support his wife and their toddler, squeezing by on little more than Aurora herself. Every dollar she asked for was one less for his son's future. It's just formula, she whispered, trying to convince herself. It's for Rose. It's not like I'm buying something frivolous. But the shame burned anyway, hot and familiar in her chest. Aurora had always been the responsible one, even as a child. When their father left when she was 12 and Travis 10, she'd stepped up to help their mother. She'd started babysitting at 13, got her first real job at 15, and had put herself through community college while working full-time. Being needy didn't suit her. Asking for help felt like admitting defeat. Rose's crying intensified, pulling Aurora from her thoughts. The baby's face was flushed, her little fists clenched tight. Aurora bounced her gently, weighing her options. There was Mrs. Garcia next door, a kind elderly woman who sometimes watched Rose when Aurora worked weekend shifts. But Mrs. Garcia lived on a fixed income, and Aurora had already noticed her neighbor cutting back on her own groceries. Just yesterday, Aurora had given the woman her last loaf of bread, claiming she had plenty when in truth she'd gone without dinner herself. Monica, her boss at the diner? She'd already advanced Aurora's paycheck twice this year. The last time, she'd done it with a look of concern that bordered on pity. "Honey, you need to find a more stable situation," she'd said gently. "This isn't sustainable." Aurora had nodded and promised things would get better, knowing they likely wouldn't. The food pantry wouldn't open until Tuesday, and she'd already used her allotment last week. The formula they provided had run out faster than expected when Rose went through a growth spurt, drinking more than usual. Aurora glanced at the clock again. 3:27 a.m. No stores were open, no services available. The WIC office was closed until morning, and even then, her paperwork issues would take days to resolve. Travis remained her only viable option. He would have formula for his son, or at least the means to send money for an emergency purchase. She knew he wouldn't hesitate, and that was precisely what made it so hard to ask. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Rose. "Mama tried to do this alone. I really did." Aurora's finger hovered over Travis's name. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose gutter she couldn't afford to fix. The sound seemed to emphasize the fragility of her situation. One more thing falling apart, one more problem she couldn't solve alone. Rose hiccuped against her shoulder, exhausted from crying, but still restless with hunger. The baby's need finally tipped the scales. Aurora pressed the call button, then immediately hung up. 3:30 in the morning. She couldn't wake Travis's whole household. His wife worked early shifts as a nurse. Their toddler was a light sleeper. A call now would disrupt what little rest they managed to get. A text, then, less intrusive, less desperate sounding. Travis might see it when he woke naturally and respond then. Aurora took a deep breath and opened a new message, her last thread of independence unraveling as she prepared to type. Aurora settled into the corner of her small couch, adjusting Rose against her shoulder. The baby had quieted somewhat, though her breathing still hitched with occasional sobs. Aurora balanced her phone in her free hand, thumb poised over the blank message field. How to begin? What words could possibly convey her desperation without sounding pathetic? Aurora stared at the empty text box, the cursor blinking expectantly. "Hey Travis, hope you're good." Too casual, too false. Of course he'd know immediately that things weren't fine if she was texting at this hour. I hate to ask, but... No, starting with an apology would only amplify the awkwardness. Emergency situation. Too alarming. He'd think someone was injured. Aurora deleted each attempt before completing a single sentence. The words wouldn't come, strangled by pride before they could reach her fingertips. Rose whimpered softly, as if sensing her mother's distress. "It's for her," Aurora reminded herself firmly. "Not for me." She closed her eyes for a moment, summoning courage. When she opened them again, she began typing steadily, letting the raw truth flow. "Travis, I'm sorry to bother you. I ran out of baby formula for Rose, and I don't get paid until next Friday. She's so hungry and I'm struggling. Do you have any formula at home, or could you maybe lend me a little so I can get some? I hate to ask, but I don't know what else to do. Rose is all I care about. Please." Aurora read the message over twice. Every word felt heavy with admission that she couldn't provide for her daughter, that her careful planning had failed, that she needed rescue yet again. The text laid bare her inadequacy in plain, undeniable language. Her thumb hovered over the delete button. Perhaps there was another way. Perhaps if she just held out until morning, she could figure something out. Maybe the church pantry would be open, or perhaps Monica would advance her just enough for a small can of formula. But these were fantasies, and Aurora knew it. The church pantry had been closed for renovations all month. Monica had already stretched the diner's finances thin to help her. And Rose, sweet, innocent Rose, couldn't wait until some vague maybe materialized. Aurora glanced down at her daughter. In sleep, Rose's face had relaxed somewhat, her long eyelashes casting tiny shadows on her cheeks. She wouldn't stay asleep for long without proper feeding. Soon the hunger would wake her again, and the cycle of crying would resume. The thought steeled Aurora's resolve. With a quick breath, she tapped send before she could reconsider. The message whooshed away with a soft sound, carrying with it both Aurora's hope and her shame. The clock on her phone showed 3:42 a.m. Travis wouldn't see it until morning, but at least the request was made. The admission of defeat was official. Aurora leaned her head back against the couch cushion, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. The weight of the day, of all the days leading to this moment, pressed down on her shoulders. She'd done what she needed to do. She'd reached out. Now all she could do was wait. Aurora dozed fitfully, Rose sleeping against her chest. The baby's warmth and the rhythmic sound of her breathing had finally lulled Aurora into a light sleep, though worry kept her from sinking deeper. Every few minutes she would stir, check that Rose was comfortable, and glance at her phone. The screen remained stubbornly blank. No reply from Travis. At 4:17 a.m., a soft chime broke the silence. Aurora's eyes flew open, instantly alert. She carefully shifted Rose to reach her phone without disturbing the baby. A reply. Her heart leapt with relief, only to stutter when she saw the message. "Hello. You might have the wrong number. But I saw your message, and I want to help. Do you and the baby have any formula left for tonight?" Aurora blinked, reading the text twice more. Wrong number? She quickly checked the contact information and realized with a sinking feeling that she'd misdialed. Instead of texting Travis at his new number, she'd sent her plea to a complete stranger. Heat rushed to her face as mortification set in. She'd just shared her most private struggle, her failure as a mother, with someone she didn't even know. Someone who now had a direct window into her desperation. "No, no, no," she whispered, careful not to wake Rose. This was worse than asking for help. This was broadcasting her neediness to the void. Aurora's fingers trembled as she typed a hasty reply. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have the wrong number. I'm embarrassed. Please ignore this. I didn't mean to bother you." She sent it quickly, hoping to close this humiliating chapter. With any luck, the stranger would delete the conversation and forget it ever happened. The response came almost immediately. "It's really okay. I'm actually in town, not far away. I'd be happy to help you get what you need for your baby. Please, let me help. I know it's sudden, but I can't in good conscience ignore that you're in need." Aurora stared at the message, confusion mingling with disbelief. Who responds to a wrong number by offering help? It seemed too good to be true, and, in Aurora's experience, things that seemed too good to be true invariably were. Before she could formulate a response, another message appeared. "If you're uncomfortable meeting, I can leave some formula on your porch or have it delivered, whatever you prefer. Just tell me what you need." Aurora's heart pounded against her ribs. The stranger seemed sincere, but caution held her back. Was this real kindness, or something else entirely? The grandfather clock in the hall struck 1 in the morning, its deep chimes echoing through the empty corridors of the country estate. Sebastian Davenport looked up from the stack of contracts on his mahogany desk, realizing he'd been staring at the same paragraph for 20 minutes without comprehending a word. He pushed back from the desk and stood, stretching his tall frame. At 34, he kept himself fit despite the long hours his business demanded. Tonight, however, weariness clung to him like a second skin. He crossed the study to the wall of windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. The estate stretched for acres in every direction, pristine, perfect, and utterly lifeless. Sebastian pressed his forehead against the cool glass. Outside, mist gathered along the rolling lawns, ghostly fingers reaching toward the house. The scene held a certain melancholy beauty that matched his mood. He had purchased this property outside Sage Hollow as a retreat, a place to escape the constant demands of Davenport Industries. Yet in 3 months of ownership, the house had never felt like home. Home required more than expensive furniture and original artwork. It needed voices, laughter, the comforting sounds of people moving about their lives. Sebastian's footsteps echoed too loudly here, reminding him with every step that he walked these rooms alone. He returned to his desk and picked up the half-empty glass of bourbon he'd been nursing all evening. The amber liquid caught the light from his desk lamp, glowing like trapped sunlight. Sebastian took a measured sip, letting the warmth spread through his chest. On his desk sat framed photographs, memories preserved under glass. His parents on their 20th anniversary, his father's arm around his mother's waist, both smiling. His sister at 16, radiant at her school dance. And the most recent, his executive team at the launch of their newest product, Line, a success that had added several billion to the company's valuation. Success. The word tasted hollow on his tongue. What good was building an empire when there was no one to share it with? His colleagues respected him, but maintained a careful distance. His few relationships had fizzled when women discovered his work would always come first. Or worse, when they seemed more interested in his bank account than the man behind it. Sebastian set down his glass with a quiet clink. At the height of his professional achievements, his personal life remained a study in solitude. The irony wasn't lost on him. He could buy practically anything in the world except genuine connection. He glanced at his watch, debating whether to attempt sleep. His bedroom upstairs felt as impersonal as a hotel suite, despite the designer. His assurances that the space reflected his personality perfectly. Sebastian almost laughed at the thought. What did it say about him that his personality could be summed up in neutral colors and clean lines? The soft chime of his phone interrupted his brooding. Sebastian frowned. Few people had this private number, and fewer still would use it at this hour unless something was wrong. He reached for the device, expecting a business emergency from the Asian markets, or perhaps a text from his insomniac CFO. Instead, an unknown number glowed on the screen, along with the preview of a message that began with a name he didn't recognize, Travis. Sebastian unlocked his phone, curiosity overriding his usual caution with unknown numbers. The message filled his screen. Travis, I'm sorry to bother you. I ran out of baby formula for Rose, and I don't get paid until next Friday. She's so hungry, and I'm struggling. Do you have any formula at home, or could you maybe lend me a little so I can get some? I hate to ask, but I don't know what else to do. Rose is all I care about. Please. He read it twice, recognizing immediately that the message wasn't meant for him. The sender had mistakenly texted his number, clearly intending to reach someone named Travis. A brother, perhaps, or a friend. Someone they trusted enough to reveal such vulnerability. What struck Sebastian most was the raw desperation bleeding through the carefully composed words. He could almost see the person on the other end, a parent alone in the night, trying to soothe a hungry child. The image stirred something in him, a memory from his own childhood of empty cupboards and his mother's worried face. Before his company's success, before the mansions and private jets, Sebastian had known hunger. His family had struggled after his father's business failed. He remembered his mother watering down milk to make it last, the burn of shame when she had to use food stamps at the grocery store. They had climbed out of poverty through hard work and some lucky breaks, but Sebastian had never forgotten those lean years. The text message brought it all rushing back, the vulnerability, the fear. The quiet dignity in asking for help when pride demanded silence. Sebastian stared at his phone, aware that he should probably ignore the message. It wasn't his problem. The sender would realize their mistake and contact the right person. Yet he couldn't bring himself to set the phone down. Sebastian stood abruptly, decision made. If this person lived in Sage Hollow, as the area code suggested, they weren't far. The town had a 24-hour convenience store just off Main Street. He'd noticed it on his drives through the small community. They would carry baby formula. He didn't question the impulse that drove him to respond, only tapped out a reply. Hello, you might have the wrong number, but I saw your message, and I want to help. Do you and the baby have any formula left for tonight? His finger hovered over the send button for just a moment. Was he overstepping? Would his offer frighten the desperate parent on the other end? Sebastian sent the message anyway. The worst that could happen was rejection. They could simply ignore him or tell him to mind his own business. He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair and picked up his car keys from the silver tray on the console table. Outside, The night was cold and clear, stars visible beyond the mist that clung to the ground. As Sebastian slid into his car, his phone chimed with a response. For the first time in months, perhaps years, Sebastian felt something shift inside. Him, purpose replacing the emptiness that had become his constant companion. Tonight, he could make a difference for someone, and somehow, that meant everything. Aurora's message glowed on the screen. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have the wrong number. I'm embarrassed. Please ignore this. I didn't mean to bother you." Sebastian read the reply and understood the mortification behind those words. He stood in his foyer, keys in hand, determined not to let this connection slip away. He could almost feel the sender's desire to retreat, to pretend the vulnerable moment had never happened. But retreat meant a hungry baby and a desperate mother with nowhere to turn. He typed quickly, "It's really okay. I'm actually in town, not far away. I'd be happy to help you get what you need for your baby. Please, let me help. I know it's sudden, but I can't in good conscience ignore that you're in need." Sebastian sent the message, then added another before she could respond. "If you're uncomfortable. Meeting. I can leave some formula on your porch or have it delivered, whatever you prefer. Just tell me what you need." He watched the screen, waiting. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. The person on the other end was struggling with how to respond. Sebastian could imagine their conflict, weighing desperate need against the danger of accepting help from a stranger. After what felt like an eternity, a reply appeared. "I don't want to trouble you. This was a mistake. I was trying to reach my brother. I'm sorry." The hesitation was clear, even in text. Sebastian walked to his car, sliding into the driver's seat while crafting his response. He needed to be reassuring without seeming threatening, generous without appearing suspicious. "No trouble at all. I'm awake, and I have a car. I can run to an all-night store and get formula for you. I remember how important it is for babies to eat on schedule. I promise. I just want to help. No strings attached." He started the engine, letting it warm up as he waited. The dashboard clock showed 4:25 a.m. The roads would be empty at this hour, the town still asleep. Deciding to take another approach, Sebastian sent a follow. "Up, I know we're strangers. My name is Sebastian. What's yours?" Offering his name felt like extending a hand across the digital void. It made him real, a person rather than an anonymous texter. The response came after a pause. "Aurora. My name is Aurora, and my baby is Rose." Sebastian felt a jolt at the name. Rose. His mother's name had been Rose. The coincidence struck him as meaningful somehow, like the universe nudging him forward. Aurora, like the dawn. "It's a beautiful name," he replied, then added, "Aurora, you and Rose shouldn't have to wait until morning to eat. I can bring some formula over right now." "I don't mind at all." The next reply took longer. Sebastian waited, engine humming quietly in the driveway of his estate. Finally, "Though, okay. If you're sure it's not too much trouble, I'm at 14 Oak Lane, the little house at the end of the street." "I really can't thank you enough, Sebastian." Relief flooded through him. She'd taken the leap of faith, shared her address, accepted his help. Sebastian put the car in drive, already plotting the quickest route to the convenience store and then to Oak Lane. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Please don't worry," he typed, then added, "I'm glad you sent that text, even if it was by mistake." Aurora's response came quickly this time, "Thank you." "I don't know what else to say." Sebastian could feel the weight lifting from her words, the desperate edge softening into cautious hope. He pulled onto the main road, the headlights cutting through the darkness. "No need to say anything. I'll see you soon," he replied. As he drove toward town, Sebastian reflected on the strange turn his night had taken. An hour ago, he'd been alone in his study, contemplating the emptiness of his success. Now he had purpose, direction, a concrete way to help someone in need. The convenience store appeared ahead, its fluorescent sign one of the few lights in the sleeping town. Sebastian parked and hurried inside, nodding to the sleepy clerk. He found the baby aisle and studied the formula options. Not knowing exactly what Rose needed, he selected 2 large cans of premium infant formula, along with a pack of bottles in case Aurora needed those too. At the register, the clerk raised an eyebrow at the purchases and the late hour, but said nothing. Sebastian paid, declined a bag, and carried the items back to his car. As he drove toward Oak Lane, Sebastian checked his navigation. The address was in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of town. Small houses built in the 1950s, far from his own estate. He wondered about Aurora, about the circumstances that had led to her late night plea for help. He wondered about little Rose, hungry and waiting. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Sebastian felt connected to something real, something that mattered. The sensation was both unfamiliar and strangely comforting. Aurora paced her small living room, Rose finally asleep in her arms after crying herself into exhaustion. The text exchange with Sebastian had left her jittery with a mixture of hope and apprehension. What kind of person responds to a wrong number by offering help at 4 in the morning? Either someone extraordinarily kind or someone with ulterior motives. She glanced out the window for the 5th time in as many minutes. The street remained empty, the neighboring houses dark and quiet. She had given her address to a complete stranger. The thought sent a fresh wave of anxiety through her, yet desperation outweighed fear. Rose needed formula, and this Sebastian person was bringing some. Aurora adjusted the sleeping baby against her shoulder and tried to prepare what she would say when he arrived. Should she invite him in, thank him at the door and quickly close it? How did one navigate accepting charity from a stranger without seeming either ungrateful or too trusting? A pair of headlights turned onto Oak Lane, moving slowly as if searching for a house number. Aurora's heart leaped into her throat. The car was nicer than any she'd seen in this neighborhood, sleek and black, expensive without being flashy. It stopped in front of her house. A tall figure emerged, carrying a shopping bag. He moved with confidence but not aggression, pausing at her gate as if giving her time to assess him from the safety of her window. Even in the dim streetlight, Aurora could see he was well dressed, dark jeans, and what looked like a cashmere sweater under an open coat. His dark hair was neatly kept, his posture straight but not stiff. Taking a deep breath, Aurora moved to the door. With Rose still sleeping against her shoulder, she opened it just as Sebastian reached the porch steps. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. "Sebastian?" Aurora finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, offering a gentle smile. "Yes. Aurora, I presume." His voice matched his appearance, warm, educated, with the slight hint of an accent she couldn't place. Not threatening, but not overly familiar either. He maintained a respectful distance at the bottom of the steps. "Thank you for coming," Aurora said, shifting Rose slightly. "I still can't believe you're here." Sebastian glanced at the sleeping baby, his expression softening. "Is this Rose?" he asked. Aurora nodded. She just fell asleep. She was crying for hours. Sebastian held up the shopping bag. "I got formula. I wasn't sure which kind she needs, so I bought a couple of options. The premium one seemed best." Aurora's eyes widened at the sight of 2 large cans, far more than she had expected. That's too much. I can't accept all that." "Please," Sebastian said, his tone earnest. "It's the least I can do. No child should go hungry." Something in the way he said it, a flicker of old pain perhaps, made Aurora believe him. This wasn't just casual charity, there was conviction behind his words. "You can come in," she found herself saying. "It's cold out, and I'd feel terrible sending you away without even offering you a cup of tea after all this trouble." Sebastian hesitated, then nodded. "If you're comfortable with that." Aurora stepped back, allowing him entry into her small home. She felt a flash of embarrassment at the worn furniture, the patched curtains, the obvious signs of financial struggle. But Sebastian's eyes held no judgment as he entered, only kindness. "I'll make up a bottle right away," Aurora said, leading him to the kitchen. "She'll wake up hungry soon." Sebastian set the formula cans on her counter, along with the package of bottles. "I got these too, just in case." Aurora felt tears prick her eyes at the thoughtfulness. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." "No need to say anything," Sebastian replied, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Rose. "I'm just glad I could help." Aurora studied him in the kitchen light. Up close, she could see that he was probably in his early 30s, with intelligent eyes and the subtle signs of someone accustomed to responsibility. Though clearly wealthy, there was nothing arrogant in his demeanor. "May I ask why?" Aurora couldn't help questioning. "Why would you help a complete stranger in the middle of the night?" Sebastian considered her question. "Because once, a long time ago, someone helped my family when we needed it, and I never forgot how much that meant." Aurora paced the small living room, one hand nervously smoothing her tangled brown hair, the other cradling a now wide-awake Rose. The baby sensed her mother's anxiety and whimpered softly on Aurora's shoulder. In the past 20 minutes, Aurora had experienced a whirlwind of emotions: shock that Sebastian, a total stranger, was willing to help her at 4 in the morning, fear that this might be too good to be true, relief at the promise of formula on the way, and nervous anticipation at the idea of meeting this kind man who had answered her accidental plea. She had almost convinced herself the text exchange was a dream, but the lights of an approaching car now swept across her front window, cutting through the darkness. Aurora's heart leapt into her throat. "He's here." Stepping to the window, she peeked out and saw a sleek black car park under the old oak tree by her gate. The engine purred quietly before shutting off. In the glow of the street lamp, Aurora glimpsed a tall figure step out, carrying what looked like a grocery bag. For a split second, panic flared, opening her door to a stranger in the middle of the night defied every lesson her mother had taught her about safety. But something told her this was different. His messages had been nothing but respectful and considerate, and he had given his name, Sebastian. Somehow, it felt like she already knew him, just a little. Aurora gently bounced Rose to keep her calm and mustered her courage. She opened the front door just as the stranger ascended the creaky porch steps. For a moment, both of them paused, taking in the sight of one another in the dim porch light. Sebastian had expected to find a tired mother, but he was not prepared for the young woman standing before him. Aurora's face, though drawn with worry and fatigue, was kind and graceful. Loose strands of chestnut hair framed her pale face. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she had an air of gentle strength. Sebastian noticed she held her baby protectively, her body angled as if to shield the little one. Aurora, for her part, found herself momentarily speechless. The man at her doorstep was tall, probably over 6 feet, and even in the low light, he exuded an effortless confidence. He looked around early 30s, with neatly kept dark hair and eyes that reflected genuine concern. He wore casual clothes, dark jeans and a grey sweater under his open coat, yet something about his posture and the subtle quality of his attire hinted at refinement. "Sebastian?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. He offered a small, warm smile. "Yes, Aurora, I presume." She nodded, adjusting Rose in her arms. "Thank you for coming. You really didn't have to." I don't even know what to say." Her voice wavered, the mix of gratitude and embarrassment bringing heat to her cheeks. Sebastian lifted the grocery bag slightly. "It's okay. I'm glad to help." He glanced at the baby, who peered at him with round, curious eyes. "This must be Rose," he said gently. Aurora managed a smile as Rose gurgled at the sound of her name. Yes, she was asleep, but she woke up a few minutes ago. As if on cue, Rose gave a soft, plaintive cry, a reminder of why Sebastian was there in the first place. "Here," Sebastian said, concern flashing across his face. "Let's get her fed." He opened the bag and pulled out 2 large cans of premium infant formula. "I hope I got the right kind. The store didn't have many options at this hour, but these looked good. If it doesn't work, I'll find another store." "It's perfect," Aurora interrupted, relief flooding her voice. She realized she was on the verge of tears again. "Really? It's more than I imagined. Thank you." She stepped back. "Please, would you like to come in? It's cold out, and I I'd feel awful sending you away without at least a warm drink after you went through so much trouble." Sebastian hesitated for a moment, then nodded graciously. "If you're comfortable with that, sure, just for a moment." Aurora led him into the modest living room. The space was tiny and humble, painfully so when she suddenly viewed it through the eyes of an outsider. The threadbare couch, the second-hand coffee table with a missing wheel propped up by a book, the faint smell of baby powder and last night's pasta in the air. She blushed, hoping he wouldn't judge her, but if Sebastian noticed any of it, he gave no indication. His focus remained on Aurora and the fussing infant in her arms. "Make yourself at home," she said apologetically, gesturing to the couch. She quickly cleared a baby blanket and a couple of Rose's toys off the seat. Sebastian took a seat carefully, as if not to intrude, setting the formula cans on the coffee table. Aurora didn't waste another second. She had a clean bottle ready and immediately opened one of the cans. Her hands were shaking with anticipation as she scooped formula and added warm water from the kettle she had kept heated. Rose's whimpers escalated into cries at the smell of milk. "Almost there, baby," Aurora cooed, snapping the bottle lid on and swirling the contents. Sebastian watched quietly from the couch, his heart aching at the scene. Aurora's frantic movements, the baby's cries of hunger. It hit him hard, seeing the reality up close. This wasn't just a text or an abstract situation. This was a mother and child in real need, and only a thin wall separated them from true hardship. A wave of protectiveness and compassion swelled in him. Aurora hurried over to the rocking chair by the window, easing down with Rose in her arms. She offered the bottle, and Rose latched on eagerly. Within moments, the only sound in the room was the infant's contented gulps. Aurora closed her eyes briefly, uttering a silent thank you. Her shoulders relaxed for the first time that night. Sebastian felt a lump in his throat as he witnessed the baby feeding, and Aurora's palpable relief. He realized he'd been clutching his hands together and forced himself to relax. After a minute, he quietly asked, "Is she okay now?" Aurora glanced up, eyes shining with gratitude. "Yes, better than okay." She looked down at Rose, who was sucking earnestly, little fingers resting against Aurora's hand. She was so hungry. "I was so scared she'd have to wait until morning." "You're doing great," Sebastian said softly. "She's lucky to have you." The words came out before he could think, but he meant them sincerely. He had enough experience to know that not all parents showed this level of dedication and sacrifice. Aurora flushed at the compliment, a mix of pride and shame flickering in her eyes. I don't feel like I'm doing great," she murmured. "Tonight, I felt like I was failing her." Sebastian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Asking for help when you need it isn't failing. In fact, it's incredibly brave." His voice was earnest. "You put your daughter first. That's what good mothers do." Aurora met his gaze then. In the warm lamplight, Sebastian's eyes were a gentle hazel, full of understanding. She felt a connection in that moment, a sense that this man truly saw her struggle without judgment. Rose finished her bottle with a satisfied sigh. Aurora lifted the baby to her shoulder and gently patted her back to burp her. A soft belch and a gurgle later, Rose's cries had turned to the sweet, drowsy murmurs of a content baby. Within minutes, the infant was snuggling into her mother's neck, already drifting back to sleep now that her belly was full. Aurora stood carefully. "I'll just put her down in the crib. I'll be right back." "Of course," Sebastian replied quietly, rising from the couch. "Take your time." He watched as Aurora carried the now sleeping Rose to the bedroom nook just off the living area. Aurora's figure was silhouetted in the doorway for a moment as she gently laid her baby down and pulled a warm quilt over her. Humming a faint lullaby, Aurora brushed her fingers through the wispy curls on Rose's head until the child settled completely. The tenderness of the scene made Sebastian's chest tighten. A memory of his own mother doing the same for him flickered in his mind, a memory he hadn't revisited in years. Aurora returned, tiptoeing back into the living room and pulling the door half closed behind her to keep the baby's room quiet. She gave Sebastian an apologetic smile. "Sorry, I just wanted to make sure she's fully asleep." "You don't have to apologize for caring for your baby," Sebastian said kindly. I understand. Aurora gestured for him to sit again, and she took the other end of the small couch, tucking one leg beneath her. Now that the immediate crisis was handled, an awkwardness crept in. She suddenly became acutely aware of the man sitting in her living room, a stranger just an hour ago, yet now forever imprinted in her mind as the person who came through when she had nowhere else to turn. "I still can't believe you're here," she said softly, breaking the silence. Her eyes drifted to the empty bottle on the table and the precious cans of formula. "I don't know how to thank you enough. You saved us tonight." Sebastian shook his head. "I didn't do anything special. Anyone with a heart would have done the same." A wry smile touched Aurora's lips. "I'm not sure many people would drive out in the middle of the night for a stranger, Mr. She realized she didn't even know his last name. "Just Sebastian," he quickly supplied. "Let's keep it on a first-name basis." He offered that same friendly smile that put her at ease. "And for what it's worth, I think you would have done the same if the roles were reversed." Aurora nodded slowly. She liked that he didn't throw his last name or any titles around. He felt down to earth. "Maybe," she admitted. "I try to help when I can, but lately I haven't had much to give." Sebastian glanced at the modest home around them. He could see the signs of struggle, thrift store furniture, a few patches. On the Afghan draped over the chair, the faint circles under Aurora's eyes. Yet there were also signs of love, a framed photo of a smiling older woman, likely Aurora's mother, on the mantel, a colourful mobile hanging above Rose's crib, visible through the cracked door, a stack of baby books on the side table. This was a home where someone was trying very hard to make the best of little. "Sometimes, letting someone else help is the hardest thing," he said gently. He knew that all too well from his own past. "I'm really glad you did." Aurora exhaled, a hint of a laugh escaping. "Honestly, I almost didn't. When you first replied, I was mortified. I never ask anyone for help. It's just—" She paused, debating how much to say, but something about Sebastian's genuine interest encouraged her to continue. "I've always handled things on my own. When Rose's father left us, I decided I would do whatever it took to raise her without depending on anyone. My mom raised me that way, and I thought I could do the same. But tonight I just—" Her voice caught. "I had no other choice. I was so scared for my little girl." Sebastian's hands tightened into fists briefly at the mention of the father who had abandoned them. He kept his voice calm, though. "I can't imagine how hard that's been for you. You're strong, Aurora. Stronger than you know." She gave him a grateful look, wiping a stray tear that had escaped. The intensity of the last hour was finally ebbing, leaving her drained but also strangely at peace. Here she was, sitting next to a compassionate stranger who felt like a friend already. The warmth and safety she felt in his presence surprised her. She realized she hadn't even offered him that warm drink yet. "I'm sorry, I promised you something warm. I have tea, or hot cocoa, perhaps. I might even have coffee, though I don't usually brew it this late." "Tea would be great," Sebastian replied, smiling. In truth, he didn't care about the drink, but he sensed she needed to do this, to reclaim a bit of dignity by hosting him properly even in her hardship. Aurora hopped up and filled the kettle again, her movements light with relief now rather than frantic. As she prepared 2 mugs with tea bags, she glanced over her shoulder. "So, Sebastian, you live nearby? I wasn't sure if you were just passing through or—" "I have a place just outside town," he replied. He chose his words carefully, not wanting to get into specifics of his estate or wealth tonight. This moment wasn't about him. "I came out here to get away from the city for a while. Not too far from Oak Lane, actually. Sage Hollow is a beautiful town." Aurora smiled as she poured the steaming water. "It is. I've lived here all my life. It's small, but it has its charm. Though in winter, it gets pretty quiet." He accepted the mug of tea she handed him. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Aurora felt a small jolt at the gentle contact. She returned to the couch with her own mug. Sebastian blew on the tea, then asked softly, "How long have you been on your own with Rose?" Aurora wrapped her hands around her mug for warmth. "Since the beginning," she said, looking down at the amber liquid. There was no bitterness in her tone, just a matter-of-fact acceptance. Her father left when I was 3 months pregnant. He wasn't ready to be a parent. I suppose I wasn't either, but I didn't have a choice. Once I knew she was coming, I was all in. Sebastian's chest tightened with empathy and a flicker of anger at the man who'd abandoned them. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "That must have been very hard." Aurora shrugged lightly, eyes distant. "It was. Still is some days. But I had my mom at least, for part of the time. She was my rock." Aurora's voice softened fondly. "She passed away shortly after Rose was born. Got to hold her granddaughter once. Then she was gone." A tear rolled down Aurora's cheek, but she wiped it quickly, not wanting to spiral into grief tonight. Sebastian felt a pang in his own heart. He knew too well the pain of losing a parent. "I'm sure she was incredibly proud of you," he said, recalling the framed photo he'd seen. "And she'd be proud of how you're raising your daughter." Aurora swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. "I hope so." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea. Sebastian checked his watch and realized it was nearly 5 in the morning. "It's very late," he said reluctantly. "I should let you get some rest before Rose wakes up again." Aurora nodded, though part of her didn't want him to leave. This connection felt too important to end so soon. "Of course. You must be tired too." They stood, and Sebastian handed her his mug. "Thank you for the tea, and for trusting me enough to let me help." Aurora set the mugs on the coffee table. "I should be the one thanking you. I don't know what would have happened if—" She trailed off, not wanting to imagine it. Sebastian reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Would it be all right if I checked in tomorrow, just to make sure you and Rose are doing okay?" Aurora felt a flutter in her chest at the idea that he wanted to stay in contact. "Yes, I'd like that." They exchanged phone numbers, both aware of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. As they moved to the door, Sebastian paused. "Aurora, please don't hesitate to text if you need anything else. Anything at all." She nodded, touched by his sincerity. "I won't." "Thank you again, Sebastian." He stepped onto the porch, the pre-dawn air crisp around them. Aurora wrapped her arms around herself against the chill. Without thinking, Sebastian slipped off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "You'll catch cold," he said, when she began to protest. Aurora clutched the too large coat around her, inhaling the faint cedar scent that clung to it. "I'll get it back to you tomorrow," she promised. Sebastian smiled. No rush. He descended the steps, turning back once to wave before getting into his car. Aurora stood in the doorway until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Only then did she close the door, leaning against it with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. A wrong number had brought her exactly the right person at exactly the right time. If that wasn't a miracle, she didn't know what was. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of Aurora's bedroom, warming her face as she slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, she lay still, disoriented by how deeply she had slept. Rose's contented coos from the crib beside her bed brought the previous night rushing back. Had it all been a dream? The desperate text message sent to the wrong number, the kind stranger arriving at her door with, formula in hand, the unexpected connection she'd felt sitting across from him on her worn couch. Aurora sat up and glanced toward the kitchen. There on the counter stood 2 large cans of formula, tangible proof that Sebastian had been real. His visit hadn't been a figment of her exhausted imagination or a wishful dream. She slipped out of bed and padded to the crib where Rose lay kicking her feet at the mobile overhead. The baby looked up at her mother's approach and broke into a toothless grin. Well, rested and content. "Good morning, sunshine," Aurora whispered, lifting Rose into her arms. "Someone's feeling much better today, aren't you?" Rose gurgled happily, grabbing at her mother's hair. The desperation of the previous night seemed far away now as Aurora carried her daughter to the changing table. As she went through their morning routine, fresh diaper, warm clothes, gentle kisses on pudgy cheeks, Aurora marveled at how quickly life could change. Last night she had hit rock bottom, crying alongside her hungry child with nowhere to turn. Now, just hours later, She felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not just because of the formula that would feed Rose for weeks, but because a complete stranger had shown her such kindness without expecting anything in return. Aurora prepared a bottle, her movements unhurried now that there was no shortage. As Rose drank eagerly, Aurora's mind drifted to Sebastian. In her memory, his face remained gentle and kind, his voice warm with genuine concern. She had met plenty of men since Rose's father left: customers at the diner who flirted, neighbors who offered half-hearted help, old high school acquaintances who reached out only to disappear when they realized her life now included a baby. None had looked at her the way Sebastian had, with respect untainted by pity. When Rose finished her bottle, Aurora placed her in the bouncer and reached for her phone on the kitchen counter. She hesitated, wondering if Sebastian would actually text as promised. Part of her expected that in the light of day he would move on. There, brief connection forgotten as he returned to his normal life. The screen lit up with a message notification. Aurora's heart jumped as she read, "One, good morning. How are you and Rose doing today?" She smiled, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. Sebastian had remembered. He had thought of them. With Rose cooing contentedly nearby, and the morning sun filling her small kitchen, Aurora felt the weight on her shoulders lighten just a little. Perhaps kindness wasn't as rare as she'd come to believe. Perhaps there were still good people in the world. Perhaps she wasn't as alone as she had felt in those dark hours before dawn. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Aurora allowed herself to feel not just grateful, but hopeful. Sebastian sat at the breakfast table in his estate's sunlit morning room, coffee untouched before him. He had slept only a few hours, yet felt more energized than he had in months. His mind kept returning to the small house on Oak Lane, to the young mother who had accidentally reached out to him, to the baby girl with the name that echoed his past. The household staff moved quietly around him, refreshing his coffee, offering breakfast he barely noticed. His phone lay beside his plate, the message to Aurora already sent. He found himself checking it every few minutes, wondering if she would respond. Last night had affected him deeply. In his rise to success, Sebastian had grown accustomed to solving problems with money: donations to charities, funds for disaster relief, investments in promising startups. All worthy causes, all kept at a comfortable distance. But last night had been different. He had looked into the eyes of someone in need, heard a baby's hungry cries, witnessed firsthand the relief on Aurora's face when Rose finally had food. It had been immediate, personal, real. His phone chimed with a reply. Sebastian quickly picked it up, a smile forming as he read Aurora's message. "Good morning, Sebastian. We're doing well. Rose had a good night and is much happier now, as am one. Thank you again, truly." He typed back immediately. "I'm very glad to hear that. I was thinking of you both. Hope you got some rest." Sebastian set the phone down, struck by the realization that he genuinely cared about this woman and her child, whom he'd known for less than 12 hours. There was something about Aurora, her quiet dignity, her fierce love for her daughter, the way she had maintained grace even in her darkest moment, and little Rose, innocent and trusting, bearing his mother's name like a sign he couldn't ignore. When was the last time he had felt this connected to anyone? His days were filled with business associates who wanted his influence, women who were attracted to his wealth, acquaintances who valued what he could provide rather than who he was. The irony wasn't lost on him. A billionaire surrounded by people yet profoundly alone. Last night, in a humble home on Oak Lane, he had felt more seen and more genuine than in all the boardrooms and charity galas of the past year. Sebastian stood and walked to the wall of windows overlooking his manicured gardens. The estate suddenly felt excessively large, unnecessarily grand. He thought of Aurora's modest home, small but filled with love. How she had offered him tea and conversation, despite having so little to give. His phone chimed again. Aurora had sent a photo of Rose, freshly awake and smiling a little, bundled in her baby blanket. Below the photo, "Someone wants to say thank you for last night." Sebastian felt his heart warm at the sight. He replied, She's precious. That smile made my day. Decision made, he grabbed his coat. He would go into town, perhaps visit the diner where Aurora had mentioned she worked. Not to intrude, but to check on them, to see if there was anything else they needed. For the first time in years, Sebastian felt something stirring within him, a sense of purpose beyond quarterly reports and stock prices. He wasn't quite sure what it meant yet, but he knew he couldn't simply walk away from Aurora and Rose. The next few days unfolded with a gentle rhythm, punctuated by the soft chimes of incoming messages on Aurora's phone. What began as Sebastian's morning check-ins evolved into an ongoing conversation that flowed throughout their days, a digital connection that bridged the gap between his estate and her small cottage. "Good morning. Did Rose sleep well?" Sebastian's text would arrive just after dawn, as if he knew exactly when Aurora would be up for the baby's first feeding. Aurora found herself smiling at her phone screen as she typed her reply with one hand, the other cradling Rose. She slept for a 5-hour stretch. "I feel like I won the lottery." Their exchanges carried through the morning as Aurora prepared for work, Sebastian's messages blending seamlessly into her routine. She would share small victories. "And Rose grabbed her toes today. And our everyday frustrations, and spilled coffee all over my only clean work shirt. Monday is really showing up today." Sebastian responded with warmth and humor, sending her jokes to brighten difficult days or thoughtful questions that showed he truly listened. "What was your favorite book as a kid?" he asked one afternoon, sparking a long discussion about childhood reading habits that carried them through an entire day. By the end of the first week, Aurora realized she was sharing more with Sebastian than she had with anyone since her mother died. Something about texting made it easier to open up, the slight remove of not being face to face, perhaps, or the way she could carefully choose her words. "And sometimes I worry I'm not enough for Rose," she admitted late one evening after a particularly challenging day when Rose had been fussy and Aurora's shift at the diner had been exhausting. Her father walked away so easily. What if she grows up feeling like half of her is missing? Sebastian's response came quickly. "Any man who walked away from you two made the biggest mistake of his life. Rose has everything she needs in you: love, strength, kindness. Those aren't half measures, Aurora. They're everything." His words brought tears to her eyes, a healing balm to wounds she'd carried silently. Aurora found herself staring at that message long after Rose had fallen asleep, rereading it until she could almost hear Sebastian saying the words aloud. Their digital conversation became a lifeline for both of them. Sebastian began sending photos of his morning walks, the sunrise over, the hills outside town, a family of deer he spotted near his property. Aurora responded with snapshots of Rose's milestone moments. Her first attempt at solid food, mostly ending up on her chin, her concentrated expression as she learned to roll over. "She looks so serious." Sebastian commented on a photo of Rose's furrowed brow as she examined a new toy. "And a future scientist analyzing her data." Aurora laughed aloud at his observation. "Maybe so, though at the moment her research seems focused on what happens if I put everything in my mouth." Through these exchanges, the texture of their days became intertwined. Sebastian learned Aurora's schedule when she worked at the diner, when Rose typically napped, which evenings were laundry nights at the laundromat down the street. Aurora gleaned details about Sebastian's life too, his early morning runs, his work calls that sometimes stretched past midnight, his preference for classical music while he reviewed documents. One night, after Rose was asleep, Aurora sent a message that surprised even herself with its candidness. "I never expected that a wrong number would lead to whatever this is. I'm grateful for it, though. Talking to you has become one of the best parts of my day." The three dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared as Sebastian composed his reply. "Finally, I feel the same way. Meeting you and Rose has been the most unexpected gift. I was going through the motions before. Now I look forward to each day." There was an intimacy in these admissions, a vulnerability neither had planned. Yet, it felt natural, a gradual unfolding of connection through hundreds of small messages each one a thread weaving them closer together. By the end of 2 weeks, they had established inside jokes and shared references. Sebastian knew exactly which emoji would make Aurora laugh, and Aurora could tell Sebastian's mood from the punctuation in his texts. When she sent "Can't talk now, Rose is having a meltdown and I'm running late for work," he understood precisely what she needed. Not advice, but a simple, "You've got this. Text me later when things calm down." The digital conversations created a foundation, a getting to know you that happened in reverse. Intimacy first, established through words, exchanged in vulnerable moments, then building outward into the physical world where their paths began to cross with increasing frequency. The bell above the door of the Sage Hollow diner jingled on Tuesday morning, drawing Aurora's attention from the coffee pot she was refilling. She looked up to see Sebastian entering, his tall figure immediately noticeable, among the usual breakfast crowd of retirees and local workers. Her heart gave a little jump as their eyes met across the room, his face brightening with a smile. "Well now, who's that handsome fellow?" whispered Doris, an elderly regular seated at the counter. Her eyes twinkled with the delight of potential gossip. "He's been in here every day this week, and he only ever sits in your section." Aurora felt warmth rush to her cheeks. "Just a friend," she murmured, wiping her hands on her apron as Sebastian took a seat at his usual booth by the window. The diner was a Sage Hollow institution, all chrome and vinyl with a black and white checkered floor that had been polished by decades of small-to-town foot traffic. The menu hadn't changed in 20 years, and neither had most of the customers. When someone new became a regular, everyone noticed. Coffee, black, and maybe some recommendations. Sebastian asked when Aurora approached with her order pad. His voice held a warmth that seemed reserved just for her. "I'm working my way through the menu." "The blueberry pancakes are unbeatable," Aurora suggested, pouring his coffee with practiced ease. "Though Monica's claiming her new bacon omelette special might change your life." Bold claim. "I'll have to test it." Their exchange was casual, friendly, nothing that would raise eyebrows. Yet Aurora felt the attention of the diner's other waitresses, their curious glances, following her as she put in Sebastian's order and attended to her other tables. By his third visit that week, whispers had begun circulating among the staff and regular customers. Who was this well-dressed stranger who appeared like clockwork during Aurora's shifts? Why did their conversation flow so easily, punctuated by shared laughs and lingering looks? "He left you another $20 tip," Monica, the diner's owner, commented after Sebastian departed one morning. "That's 4 times this week." Aurora shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant while bussing his table. "He's just generous." Monica raised an eyebrow. "Honey, men like that don't visit diners in towns like this unless they have a very good reason." Her tone was kind but knowing. "And I'd say that reason wears a blue uniform and makes the best coffee in 3 counties. The following week, Sebastian's presence had become such a fixture that the other waitresses automatically directed him to Aurora's section, regardless of the seating arrangement. He typically arrived during the mid-morning lull, when Aurora could occasionally spare a few minutes to sit across from him while he ate. These brief conversations, snatched between refilling ketchup bottles and taking orders, became precious moments in Aurora's day. Unlike their text exchanges, here she could see the expressions that accompanied his words, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he listened with complete attention when she spoke. "You're getting quite the reputation around here," Aurora teased one morning, sliding into the booth across from him for a quick break. "Mrs. Harrington at table 3 asked if you were a movie star hiding out in our little town." Sebastian laughed. "What did you tell her?" "That you're a secret agent recovering from a dangerous mission," Aurora said with mock seriousness. "I thought it sounded more interesting than businessmen taking a break." Their easy banter caught the attention of everyone in the small diner. When Aurora returned to the counter, Doris and her friends exchanged significant looks. "He lights up when you're near him, dear," Doris whispered as Aurora refilled her coffee. "I haven't seen a man look at a woman like that since my Harold was alive." By the end of the month, Sebastian's diner visits had become the highlight of local gossip. Some speculated he was looking to buy property in town. Others suggested more romantic motives. All agreed that whatever drew him to the worn vinyl booths of Sage Hollow Diner had something to do with a single mother who served his coffee with a smile that seemed brighter each day. Even the cook, Tom, a man of few words, had taken to preparing Sebastian's orders with extra care. "Man comes all this way to see you," he grunted to Aurora one day. "Least we can do is make sure his eggs are perfect." Aurora pretended not to notice the knowing looks and whispered comments. But secretly she treasured them, evidence that others could see what was growing between her and Sebastian, confirmation that she wasn't imagining the connection that had begun with a mistaken text and deepened with every shared moment since. The first coincidence occurred when Sebastian arrived at the diner, just as Aurora's shift ended. "I was wondering if you and Rose might want a ride home," he offered casually. "It looks like rain." Indeed, dark clouds gathered overhead, and Aurora had forgotten her umbrella. She accepted gratefully, unaware that Sebastian had checked the weather forecasts specifically to time his offer. When they arrived at her cottage, Sebastian noticed the loose gutter hanging precariously above the porch. "That could be dangerous in a storm," he commented. "I have some tools in my trunk. Would you mind if I took a look?" Before Aurora could protest, Sebastian had retrieved a small toolkit from his car and was examining the gutter. "Just needs a few screws tightened," he said, already at work. Aurora watched from the doorway, Rose on her hip, as Sebastian efficiently secured the metal that had been threatening to fall for months. "There," he said, climbing down from the small stepladder he'd produced from his trunk. "Should hold now." "You didn't have to do that," Aurora said, though relief colored her voice. She'd been worrying about that gutter all winter. Sebastian shrugged. "I was here anyway." This became a pattern, Sebastian noticing things around Aurora's home that needed attention and finding natural moments to address them. The leaky kitchen faucet that had been driving Aurora crazy with its constant drip. Sebastian happened to mention he was pretty good with basic plumbing and fixed it while visiting for tea. The stubborn front door that stuck in humid weather. He arrived one evening with sandpaper and wood polish, claiming he'd been organizing his garage and found extras. Each repair was offered casually, presented as no trouble at all, completed, with a humility that made it difficult for Aurora to feel indebted. Sebastian never made her feel like a charity case. Instead, he approached each task as a friend helping a friend. Then there were the accidental extras. "I bought too many groceries," he'd say, appearing with bags that happened to contain the exact fruits Rose was starting to enjoy as she began solid foods. Or, the bakery was having a 2-for-1 sale, he'd explain, bringing fresh bread that Aurora knew very well the local bakery never discounted. Aurora recognized these small deceptions for what they were, Sebastian's way of helping without wounding her pride. At first, she felt conflicted, determined to maintain her independence. But seeing how carefully he preserved her dignity, how he never made a show of his assistance, she gradually accepted these kindnesses for what they truly were, expressions of care. One evening, as Sebastian fixed the wobbly leg on her coffee table, Aurora brought him lemonade and sat nearby, watching his capable hands work. "You know," she said softly, "you don't have to pretend the bakery has sales for me to accept your help." Sebastian looked up, caught in his white lie. For a moment, he seemed worried she might be upset. Aurora smiled. "But thank you for caring enough to try." Their eyes met in understanding. From that moment, a new honesty emerged between them. Sebastian still helped, but without the elaborate explanations. And Aurora accepted, recognizing that true strength sometimes meant allowing someone else to care. The invitation came on a Friday evening via text. "Would you and Rose like to go for a walk at the lakeside park on Sunday? Weather forecast says it will be sunny." Aurora stared at her phone, heart fluttering. Their interactions thus far had been spontaneous. His diner visits, his coincidental arrivals at her house with tools or groceries. This was different. This was planned, deliberate, almost like a... She stopped herself from thinking the word date. After all, Rose would be there. It was just a friendly outing. "We'd love that," she replied, adding after a moment's hesitation, And Rose has been cooped up all week. She could use some fresh air. Sebastian's response came quickly. Great, I'll pick you up around 10 if that works. Sunday morning arrived with golden sunshine streaming through Aurora's windows. She fussed more than usual over what to wear, finally settling on her best jeans and a soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes. For Rose, she chose a pink knit outfit with tiny embroidered flowers and a matching hat to protect her from the mild spring breeze. At precisely 10 o'clock, Sebastian's car pulled up outside. Aurora watched through the window as he approached her door, dressed casually in dark jeans and a quilted jacket, looking both relaxed and somehow distinguished. When he knocked, she waited a beat before answering, not wanting to appear too eager. Good morning, Sebastian greeted her, his smile warming when he spotted Rose in her arms. Well, don't you look pretty today, he said to the baby, who responded with a happy gurgle and reaching hands. She knows when to turn on the charm, Aurora laughed, grabbing Rose's diaper bag and the folded stroller leaning against the wall. She's been excited all morning, almost like she knew we were going out. Sebastian immediately took the stroller from her. Allow me, he said, carrying it to his car. Aurora noticed he'd already installed a car seat in the back, brand new by the looks of it. You got a car seat? She asked, surprise evident in her voice. Sebastian nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. I thought it might be useful if we're going to be driving around together. Is that okay? The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Aurora deeply. Not only had he anticipated their need, but he'd invested in Rose's safety without making any assumptions or overstepping boundaries. It's more than okay, she said softly. Thank you. The drive to the park was short, but pleasant, filled with easy conversation about the week they'd had. Sebastian asked about the diner, and Aurora shared a funny story about a customer who'd ordered every breakfast item on the menu as a challenge. The lakeside park of Sage Hollow was the town's pride, a stretch of green space surrounding a small lake with walking paths winding through old willows and flowering dogwoods. On this spring Sunday, other families dotted the landscape, children sailing toy boats on the water, couples walking hand in hand, elderly residents feeding ducks from benches. Sebastian unfolded the stroller with surprising efficiency and waited as Aurora secured Rose inside. Shall we? He asked, offering to push. You know how to work a stroller? Aurora asked, impressed. I'm a quick study, he replied with a wink, taking the handles confidently. They set off along the paved path that circled the lake, walking side by side. Sebastian navigated the stroller expertly, occasionally making funny faces at Rose when she looked up at him. The baby responded with delighted giggles, her tiny hands reaching toward him. She likes you, Aurora observed, a warm feeling spreading through her chest at the sight. The feeling is mutual, Sebastian replied, his voice softening as he bent to adjust Rose's hat that had slipped askew. The gentle way his fingers moved, careful not to disturb the baby, showed a natural comfort with children that surprised Aurora. As they rounded the eastern side of the lake, Sebastian pointed to a wooden bench situated under a blooming cherry tree. Shall we take a break? The view is beautiful from here. They sat, Rose content in her stroller facing them, playing with a small toy Sebastian had brought. A soft fabric block with different textures that immediately captivated her attention. You really thought of everything, Aurora said, nodding toward the toy. Sebastian shrugged. I may have done some research on age-appropriate toys. Research? Aurora laughed. You make it sound so scientific. Well, there was a spreadsheet involved, he joked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The lake stretched before them, sunlight dancing on its surface. Cherry blossoms occasionally drifted down around them like pink snow. Aurora found herself relaxing fully for the first time in months, the peaceful setting and Sebastian's steady presence creating a bubble of contentment. I used to come here as a child, she said, gazing out at the water. My mom would bring a picnic, and we'd feed the ducks and make up stories about the people we saw. What kind of stories? Sebastian asked, genuinely interested. Oh, silly things. That woman with the fancy hat was actually a queen in disguise. The old man reading on the bench was a time traveler studying our century. Aurora smiled at the memory. Mom had an incredible imagination. She could make even ordinary days feel magical. Sebastian watched her face as she spoke, entranced by the way her eyes lit up. She sounds wonderful. She was, Aurora agreed, a touch of sadness in her voice. I hope I can give Rose even half the childhood she gave me. Rose chose that moment to drop her toy, fussing slightly. Before Aurora could move, Sebastian was already retrieving it, then kneeling in front of the stroller. Here you go, princess, he said softly to Rose. The baby immediately stopped fussing, captivated by Sebastian's attention. He began playing a gentle game of peekaboo that soon had Rose laughing uncontrollably, her whole body wiggling with delight. Aurora watched them, something shifting in her heart. The ease between them, the natural way Sebastian engaged with Rose without awkwardness or hesitation, it struck her deeply. Rose's father had never once shown such interest, even before he left. As they continued their walk, Sebastian took turns pushing the stroller and carrying Rose when she grew restless. He held her with confident arms, pointing out ducks and flowers, narrating the world to her as if she understood every word. The baby responded by patting his face with her tiny hands, completely comfortable in his embrace. Near noon, they found a sunny spot on the grass and spread the blanket Sebastian had brought. Aurora unpacked the simple lunch she'd prepared, sandwiches and fruit, while Sebastian entertained Rose, helping her sit up to watch a nearby dog chasing a ball. You're really good with her, Aurora said as they ate. Have you been around babies before? A shadow passed briefly over Sebastian's face. Some, he answered vaguely. Children are intuitive. They know when someone genuinely cares. As if to prove his point, Rose crawled onto his lap, babbling happily and offering him a soggy cracker she'd been gumming. Sebastian accepted it with exaggerated gratitude, making Aurora laugh. The hours passed quickly, filled with simple pleasures, feeding ducks, watching boats, on the lake, walking the winding paths while trading stories of their weeks. When Rose eventually fell, asleep in her stroller, Sebastian and Aurora found themselves walking closer together, their hands occasionally brushing in a way that sent tiny shivers up Aurora's arm. By the time they headed back to the car in the late afternoon, something had shifted between them. What had begun as a casual outing had transformed into something more meaningful, a day of shared experiences and deeper connection, with Rose as both the buffer and the bridge between them. As Sebastian drove them home, Rose slept peacefully in her car seat. The comfortable silence between the adults felt earned, like they'd reached a new level of ease with each other. Aurora gazed out the window at the passing scenery, wondering how a simple walk in the park could feel so significant. Penny for your thoughts? Sebastian asked, glancing at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. Aurora smiled. I was just thinking how nice today was. Simple, but nice. The best things often are simple, Sebastian replied. I've learned that the hard way. Something in his tone prompted Aurora to ask, what do you mean? Sebastian was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. I grew up thinking success meant complicated things, big achievements, recognition, wealth. It took me a long time to realize that the most meaningful parts of life are often the simplest, like feeding ducks with a baby, Aurora suggested. He laughed softly. Exactly like that. After a pause, he added, my childhood wasn't always stable. My father's business failed when I was young, and we struggled for several years. My mother worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Aurora turned to study his profile, surprised by this revelation. Sebastian had always seemed so confident, so secure. That must have been hard. It taught me a lot, he acknowledged. I started working young, paper routes, lawn mowing, whatever I could find. Watching my mother's determination, it shaped me. His voice softened. She was like you in some ways, fiercely protective, endlessly resourceful. What happened to her? Aurora asked gently, sensing loss in his words. Cancer, when I was 15. The word hung between them. A shared wound. It was quick, at least. My father and we drifted apart afterward. He never quite recovered from losing her. Aurora reached across the console to touch his arm briefly. I'm sorry. Losing a parent changes you. Sebastian nodded, grateful for her understanding. What about your father? You've mentioned your mother often, but he left when I was 12, Aurora said simply. Classic story. Said he was going to the store one day and never came back. We got divorce papers in the mail 3 months later. That's terrible, Sebastian said, genuine anger coloring his tone. For both you and your mother. Aurora shrugged, an old gesture that minimized an old pain. Mom was amazing. She made sure I never felt like I was missing anything. She worked at the very diner where I work now, actually. The owner, Monica, was her friend. That's how I got the job. They turned onto Oak Lane, the conversation deepening as the car slowed. Neither seemed eager for the drive to end. What did you want to be when you grew up? Sebastian asked, parking in front of her house but making no move to exit the car. Aurora laughed. A marine biologist, if you can believe it. I was obsessed with dolphins. Mom saved up for years to take me to an aquarium 3 hours away for my 13th birthday. Her eyes grew distant with the memory. I was going to college part-time for biology before... She gestured toward the back seat where Rose slept. Before life took a different turn, Sebastian finished for her. Exactly. Aurora's smile held no regret. I wouldn't trade Rose for anything, but sometimes I wonder about that other path. It's never too late, Sebastian said. For education, I mean. Aurora gave him a wry look. Single mom working at a diner doesn't exactly scream college-bound. I think you underestimate yourself, Sebastian replied seriously. From what I've seen, you can do anything you set your mind to. The simple faith in his voice touched something deep in Aurora. How long had it been since someone believed in her potential? Since someone saw her as more than just Rose's mother or a waitress? They fell silent, the moment stretching between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Aurora spoke. What about you? Did you become what you wanted to be? Sebastian considered the question carefully. On paper, yes. In reality, I'm not sure. Success came, but it felt hollow until recently. Until what? Aurora asked. His eyes met hers, warm and certain. Until a wrong number brought me to your door. The simple honesty of his answer left Aurora speechless. In that moment, she realized they had both been searching for something neither could quite name, and somehow, against all odds, they'd found it in each other. As if sensing the weight of the moment, Rose stirred in the back seat, breaking the spell with a soft coo. Aurora smiled, reaching for her door handle. Would you like to come in for dinner? She asked. Nothing fancy, just pasta, but there's plenty. Sebastian's face brightened. I'd like that very much. Together, they gathered Rose and her things, stepping into Aurora's home, not as strangers or even just friends, but as something new and undefined. Two people from different worlds who had somehow found common ground, in the stories they shared and the simple joy of a day spent together. In Sage Hollow, a town of barely 3,000 souls, secrets had the half-life of a mayfly. By the third week of Sebastian's daily appearances at the diner, his black luxury car parked conspicuously outside Aurora's modest cottage and their Sunday walks around the lake. The whispers had grown from curious murmurs to a steady hum of speculation. It began innocuously enough at Mabel's hair and beauty salon, the unofficial information hub of Sage Hollow. 80-year-old Gladys Henderson sat under the dryer, her weekly perm in progress, when she mentioned the handsome stranger she'd seen pushing Rose's stroller in the park. Walking with Aurora Evans, she reported to the captive audience of women in various states of beauty treatments, looking at her like she hung the moon. And that car of his must have cost more than my Herbert made in 5 years. Mabel, wielding her scissors like a conductor's baton, nodded sagely. He's been coming to the diner every day too. Monica told me he only sits in Aurora's section. Well, she's a pretty girl, offered Judith from under the neighboring dryer. Though I wonder what a man like that sees in a waitress with a baby. The comment hung in the air, not unkind but questioning, planting the seed that would grow into the town's collective curiosity about the mismatched pair. At Walter's Hardware, the morning coffee group, 6 retired men who gathered daily, to solve the world's problems over Walter's burnt coffee, had their own theories. "He's fixing things at her house," reported Frank Miller, who lived 2 doors down from Aurora. "Saw him last week with a toolbox, then again replacing that broken porch step." "Maybe he's a contractor," suggested Walter, refilling mugs. Bill Jenkins snorted. "No contractor drives a car like that or wears those clothes. My nephew's a contractor in the city, and he doesn't dress like he stepped out of a magazine." "Could be running from something," Ed Thompson offered ominously. "Rich guy hiding out in a small town? Sounds like one of those witness protection deals." The men nodded, satisfied with this explanation, until Walter's wife Ruth interrupted from behind the counter. "Or maybe," she said firmly, "he's just a decent man who cares about Aurora and her baby." Did that possibility cross any of your suspicious minds? The men had the grace to look abashed, but the conversation had already achieved its purpose, adding another layer to the town's growing narrative about Sebastian and Aurora. At First Community Church, the Sunday after Sebastian and Aurora's lake outing, the ladies of the Altar Guild gathered to arrange flowers and exchange information. They were shopping together at Green's Market, reported Eleanor Watson, who worked at the grocery store part-time. He was carrying the baby while Aurora picked out produce. Even bought her those expensive organic baby foods. "He's certainly generous," agreed Pastor Mike's wife, Martha. "Left a $100 donation in the collection plate last Sunday, and I don't think he's even a member." "Aurora deserves some happiness," said Betty Moore, the oldest member of the guild. "After that, no good man left her pregnant and alone, and then losing her mother so soon after. The Lord works in mysterious ways." The women murmured agreement, but Diane Foster, who had never quite approved of unwed mothers, added, "Still, it's rather sudden, isn't it? No one even knows where he came from or what he does." "Well, I heard from my daughter who works at the bank that he made a substantial donation to the Children's Hospital fundraiser," Martha countered. "Anonymous. But Caroline processed the check. Said it had lots of zeros." This revelation added yet another dimension to the town's collective image of Sebastian. Generous, wealthy, mysterious. By the time a month had passed since Sebastian's first appearance, the gossip had reached such proportions that 3 distinct theories had emerged among the townspeople. The first, favored by romantics like Betty Moore, held that Sebastian was a wealthy businessman who had fallen, instantly in love with Aurora, and was courting her the old-fashioned way, with respect and patience. The second, preferred by skeptics like Diane Foster, suggested that Sebastian had some ulterior motive. Perhaps Aurora's cottage sat on valuable land, or maybe he had a pattern of charming vulnerable women. The third theory, championed by the conspiracy-minded like Ed Thompson, maintained that Sebastian was hiding from something or someone, using quiet Sage Hollow as his refuge and Aurora as his cover. None of these theories, of course, had been shared directly with Aurora or Sebastian. But the speculation manifested in other ways, in the curious glances when they walked together through town, in the sudden silence when Aurora entered rooms, in the overly friendly greetings Sebastian received from people he'd never met. Sage Hollow was watching, evaluating, judging, and as May turned to June, the quiet observation transformed into something more direct, reaching Aurora in ways she couldn't ignore. The first comment that truly unsettled Aurora came on a busy Saturday morning at the diner. She was balancing 3 plates of pancakes when she overheard Diane Foster at table 7. "I wonder what he sees in her," Diane said, not quite softly enough. "A waitress with a baby and no education? There must be something we don't know." Aurora nearly stumbled, the words hitting her like a physical blow. She delivered the pancakes with a mechanical smile, her cheeks burning. Throughout her shift, similar whispers reached her, some well-meaning, others tinged with envy or suspicion, all focused on the apparent incongruity of Sebastian's interest in her. "He's such a catch," sighed Tina, another waitress, as they refilled ketchup bottles in the back. "Lucky you, landing a rich guy. We're just friends," Aurora replied automatically, though even to her own ears, the words sounded hollow. Tina laughed. "Friends don't look at each other the way he looks at you. I'd give anything for a man to see me like that." Plus, he's obviously loaded. That watch he wears? My brother sells jewelry, and that's a Patek Philippe. Worth more than my car. Aurora hadn't noticed Sebastian's watch. She'd noticed his kind eyes, his gentle hands with Rose, the way he listened when she spoke as if her words mattered. But now Tina's observation added a new dimension to her awareness, the material gap between them that she'd been trying to ignore. Walking home that evening, Rose babbling happily in her stroller, Aurora's mind churned with doubts. What did Sebastian see in her? She was a high school graduate with some community college credits, working as a waitress, living paycheck to paycheck. He was clearly educated, successful, accustomed to finer things. Did he pity her? Was she a charity project, the struggling single mother he could help to feel better about himself? Worse were the comments suggesting she was using him. Smart girl, Mrs. Peterson had said that morning, with a knowing wink. Latch onto him before he realizes he could do better. The insinuation stung all the more because Aurora had been so careful never to ask Sebastian for anything. Yes, he'd brought formula that first night. And yes, he'd fix things around her house, but she'd never solicited his help beyond that initial accidental text. Their relationship, whatever it was, had grown from genuine connection, not calculation. Yet doubt, once planted, grew like a weed. Aurora found herself analyzing their interactions, questioning his motives and her own worth. When Sebastian texted that evening, just checking in, "How was your day?" She hesitated before responding, suddenly self-conscious. "And fine," she wrote simply. "Tired from work." His reply came quickly. "Would you like me to bring dinner over? You could rest while I entertain Rose." The offer was tempting. Sebastian had proven himself wonderful with Rose, and Aurora's feet ached from her double shift. But Mrs. Peterson's insinuation echoed in her mind. "That's okay," she responded. "We're already settled in for the night." It was the first time she'd declined his company, and typing the words left a hollow feeling in her chest. But she needed space to think, to recalibrate, to remind herself who she was before Sebastian entered her life. That night, after Rose was asleep, Aurora stood before her bathroom mirror, examining herself critically. She saw the tired eyes, the worry lines forming at 20-6, the simple cotton pajamas frayed at the edges. Then she pictured Sebastian, his confident posture, his casually expensive clothes, his ease in the world. "What are we doing?" she whispered to her reflection. Aurora had never cared much about social status or wealth. Growing up with a single mother had taught her that character mattered more than possessions. Yet now, she found herself caught in a web of insecurity, spun partly from the town's perceptions and partly from her own fears. What if Sebastian eventually saw what everyone else seemed to see, that they came from different worlds? What if he woke up one day and realized he could do better than a small-town waitress with a baby? The thought of losing him, of watching his interest fade, hurt more than Aurora wanted to admit. Somewhere along the way, despite her best defenses, Sebastian had become important to her. Too important, perhaps, for someone whose presence in her life still felt like a beautiful, temporary dream. While Aurora wrestled with the town's perceptions and her own insecurities, Sebastian remained remarkably oblivious to the social currents swirling around them. His focus, narrow and intense, remained fixed on Aurora and rose to the exclusion of almost everything else. When he entered the diner each morning, he didn't notice the heads that turned or the conversations that paused. His eyes sought only Aurora, his smile brightening when he found her among the tables. The curious stares, the whispered comments, the significant looks exchanged, all went unregistered. As he watched Aurora move through her routine, admiring her efficiency and grace, "Everyone's very friendly here," he commented one morning, after receiving unusually attentive service from Mabel at the hair salon where he'd stopped for a quick trim. "The woman cutting my hair asked about 6 times if I was settling in okay." Aurora, who knew exactly why Mabel had been so inquisitive, merely nodded. Small town. Everyone looks out for everyone. Sebastian accepted this explanation without question. In his world of corporate boardrooms and strategic negotiations, he'd developed a keen ability to read business intentions, but remained somewhat naive about small town social dynamics. The possibility that he and Aurora had become the prime subject of local gossip simply never occurred to him. When Walter at the hardware store spent 40 to 5 minutes helping him select the perfect tools for Aurora's kitchen sink repair, dropping hints about your lady friend and selting down roots, Sebastian thought. Only that Walter was exceptionally dedicated to customer service. The knowing smiles, the leading questions, the community's collective curiosity, all sailed past his awareness. Even direct comments failed to register properly. When Pastor Mike approached him after Sebastian had accompanied Aurora to Sunday service, saying, "Aurora's had a tough road. We're all glad she's found someone to walk alongside her," Sebastian merely agreed. That Aurora was remarkable, missing the assumption embedded in the pastor's words. His blindness to gossip stemmed not from arrogance but from single-minded attention. Sebastian had discovered something precious in Aurora and Rose, a genuine connection untainted by his wealth or position. His thoughts, formerly consumed by business strategies and investment portfolios, now orbited around simpler joys, Rose's newest accomplishment, Aurora's smile when he brought her favorite coffee, the next opportunity to spend time with them both. Each evening, after parting from Aurora's cottage, Sebastian returned to his estate, with a sense of leaving his real life behind rather than returning to it. The spacious rooms, the expensive furnishings, the solitude, none of it held the warmth of Aurora. His modest living room with toys scattered on the floor and the scent of baby powder in the air. In his contented absorption, Sebastian failed to notice the cloud gathering on their horizon. While he planned their next outing and anticipated their next conversation, the town's curiosity was crystallizing into expectation, and Aurora's doubts were deepening into fear. The whispers would soon grow too loud to ignore, and the bubble of joy they'd created would face its first serious test, one that neither Sebastian nor Aurora was prepared for. One blustery afternoon in early June, Aurora had an unexpected visitor. She had just finished bathing Rose and was preparing to bundle her up for a nap when a knock sounded on her door. Wiping her hands on a towel, Aurora opened it to find a well-dressed older man standing on her porch. He wore a tailored suit and carried an air of importance that immediately made Aurora feel self-conscious in her simple jeans and sweater. "Good day," the man greeted with a polite but formal smile. "I apologize for the intrusion. I'm looking for Sebastian Davenport. I was informed this is where he's been frequently staying." Aurora blinked in confusion. "Sebastian? He doesn't live here." The man glanced down at a notepad he carried. "Ah, you must be Miss Evans, then. Pardon me, I should introduce myself. My name is Randall. I'm Mr. Davenport's personal assistant. I tried reaching him at his estate, but he wasn't in, and I recalled he mentioned spending time at an address on Oak Lane, which led me here." Aurora's mind whirled at the phrase personal assistant. She knew Sebastian had some business colleagues, but a personal assistant? And the way Randall said Mr. Davenport, with such deference. Who exactly was Sebastian Davenport? "I'm sorry. Maybe I can help somehow," she offered uncertainly, still holding Rose against her shoulder. The baby studied the stranger with wide eyes. Randall gave a courteous nod. "Actually, I was hoping to find Mr. Davenport regarding an urgent document that needs his signature for Davenport Industries. It's a multi-million-dollar acquisition that can't proceed without his approval." He paused, noticing Aurora's expression of astonishment. "He didn't mention who he is, did he?" Aurora felt her stomach drop. "I know he runs a business," she said slowly. "But Davenport Industries, acquisition." Randall looked momentarily chagrined, as if realizing he'd said too much. "Forgive me. I assumed you were aware of Mr. Davenport's position. He's a very private man, and I should not be discussing corporate matters. I'll take my leave." Before Aurora could gather her thoughts, Randall tipped his hat politely and left, heading back to a black town car parked by the curb. He left a crisp manila folder in her mailbox, presumably for Sebastian. Aurora closed the door, her heart pounding. Multi-million-dollar acquisition, personal assistant, Davenport Industries. The pieces clicked together rapidly, recalling little hints. Sebastian's high-end car, the estate he was renting. Perhaps he owned it outright. His careful sidestepping of career talk, and even how easily he bought things like baby gear without worry. Sebastian wasn't just a somewhat successful businessman taking a break. He was wealthy, truly wealthy, possibly a CEO or owner of a big company. A billionaire? The idea seemed unreal, yet the evidence pointed that way. Aurora felt a mix of awe and betrayal. Not exactly betrayal, but confusion as to why he hadn't told her the truth about the scale of his success. She tried to calm herself as she put Rose down for her nap. Maybe he had good reasons. He probably wanted to be treated normally, and he certainly acted humble. This didn't change the fact that he'd been wonderfully kind to her. Yet, she couldn't shake a gnawing insecurity growing in her gut. All her life, Aurora had known money drew lines between people, and the chasm between her and Sebastian, if he truly was as rich as it seemed, was vast. He belonged to a different world, one of private assistance and multi-million-dollar deals, far removed from her world of bargain shopping and scraping by. She thought back to moments they'd shared, the simple dinners, his easy-going attire, the way he focused on her and Rose without any sense of superiority. He never once made her feel less than. If anything, he'd uplifted her. So why did this revelation make her so uneasy? Aurora's hands trembled as she brewed a cup of chamomile tea to steady her nerves. She reasoned with herself, Sebastian's kindness was genuine, regardless of his bank account. He wasn't obligated to announce his net worth. Perhaps she should simply talk to him about it, clear the air. But as fate would have it, the town grapevine was faster than her resolve. Later that day at the diner, Monica, her boss, pulled her aside with wide eyes. "Aurora, did you hear? That friend of yours, Sebastian. Folks are saying he's the Sebastian Davenport. As in Davenport Tech? I read about him in a business magazine last year. He's a billionaire, honey." Aurora's heart sank. "Oh," was all she managed. Her worst suspicions confirmed. Monica squeezed her shoulder. "No wonder he was so generous. Some of the girls are gossiping that you snatched a rich one." Monica tried to laugh lightly, but Aurora flushed with embarrassment and discomfort. The revelation she'd hoped to process privately had already escaped into the public domain. And now, she would have to face not only her own conflicted feelings, but also the town's heightened scrutiny. The news of Sebastian Davenport's true identity swept through Sage Hollow with the speed and force of a summer storm. By mid-afternoon, Aurora had endured a steady stream of whispered comments from co-workers and even customers. "Heard he owns half of downtown in the city. She's pretty, but why would a billionaire stick around a small-town waitress? Must be a charity case or something else." She landed herself a sugar daddy lucky girl. Each hushed remark stung worse than the last. Aurora felt mortified. Is that what people thought? That she was using him for money? That he saw her as a fling or a pity project? Tina, who had previously been friendly about Sebastian's attention, now eyed Aurora with a mixture of envy and suspicion. "So he's not just rich, he's mega rich," she commented while they restocked napkins. "Did you know all along?" "No," Aurora replied honestly, her voice tight. "I had no idea." Tina raised an eyebrow. "Come on. You must have had some clue. The car, the clothes, the way he throws money around." "He never threw money around," Aurora protested. "And I don't care about that stuff." "She throws money around." "He never threw money around," Aurora protested. "And I don't care about that stuff." "Sure, honey," Tina said with a smirk that suggested she didn't believe a word. "We all don't care about dating billionaires." The older customers were kinder but equally curious. Mrs. Harrington, a regular who had always treated Aurora with grandmotherly affection, leaned across the counter during a quiet moment. "Is it true about your young man?" she asked, her eyes alight with excitement. "Mabel says he's one of those tech moguls, worth billions." Aurora forced a smile. "I honestly don't know much about his business, Mrs. Harrington." The elderly woman patted her hand. "Well, it's about time something good happened for you, dear. After everything with Rose's father and losing your mother, just be careful. Rich men can be complicated. The concern in her voice was genuine, but it only added to Aurora's growing unease. Did everyone believe she couldn't discern Sebastian's character for herself? Did they think she was naive enough to be manipulated by wealth and charm? By closing time, Aurora's emotions had run a complete circuit from shock to embarrassment to anger and back again. Monica closed the diner's blinds and sat down across from Aurora, who was mechanically wiping tables. "It's like the town's gone crazy," Monica observed. "I haven't seen this much gossip since Mayor Thomas's wife ran off with the golf instructor." Aurora set down her cloth. "I feel like an idiot, Monica. Everyone knew but me." "Not everyone knew," Monica corrected gently. "But yes, there were signs. That watch of his alone costs more than most people here make in a year. I just figured if he wasn't telling you, he had his reasons." "That's the thing," Aurora said, frustration creeping into her voice. "What reasons? Was he studying how the other half lives? Was I some kind of experiment in simplicity?" Monica shook her head. "That's not fair, and you know it. The man clearly adores you and Rose. I've seen how he looks at you when you're not watching. That's not pity or curiosity. It's something a lot more serious." Aurora wanted to believe her, but doubt had taken firm root. The memory of Sebastian's genuine smile, his gentle hands helping Rose with her blocks, the thoughtful way he listened when Aurora spoke, these images now competed with new ones, Sebastian in corporate boardrooms, at exclusive galas, surrounded by beautiful, sophisticated people who understood his world. As Aurora left the diner, she noticed several people on the street, watching her, their expressions a mix of curiosity and speculation. She kept her head high, but inside she felt exposed, as if her relationship with Sebastian, previously a tender private thing, had been dissected and displayed for public consumption. The whispers followed her down Main Street. By the time she reached Mrs. Garcia's house to pick up Rose from babysitting, Aurora felt raw, every nerve ending exposed. Even Mrs. Garcia, who had never shown interest in town gossip, couldn't resist asking, "Is it true about your Sebastian? Elena at the pharmacy says he's famous in the business world." Aurora managed a non-committal response, gathered Rose and hurried home, seeking refuge from the relentless curiosity that had transformed her quiet life into a spectacle. Like this video, if you believe love can overcome their differences, and comment with your perspective on wealth secrets in relationships. By evening, Aurora's emotional landscape had become a battlefield of conflicting feelings. She moved around her small house in a daze, going through the motions of her evening routine with Rose, while her mind churned with questions and doubts. Rose, sensing her mother's distress, was unusually fussy. As Aurora rocked her daughter, trying to soothe her to sleep, she couldn't help but see their modest surroundings. Through new eyes that now understood the vast gulf between her reality and Sebastian's. The second-hand crib she'd been so proud to find at a yard sale and refinish herself now looked shabby. The curtains she'd sewn from discount fabric seemed pathetic attempts at homemaking. Even the books on her shelf, dog-eared paperbacks she treasured, suddenly appeared childish, compared to what she imagined must be leather-bound classics in Sebastian's library. "What was he thinking, Rose?" she whispered, tears threatening. "What could someone like him possibly see in us?" The question wasn't entirely fair, and Aurora knew it. Sebastian had never once made her feel inadequate. He had sat comfortably on her worn couch, praised her simple home-cooked meals, and treated her tiny cottage with the same respect he might afford a mansion. The problem wasn't his behavior, it was the revelation of a truth that made Aurora question everything, including herself. Had she been blind? Had her desperation for connection, for help with Rose, for adult companionship, led her to miss obvious signs? Worse, had she subconsciously known and chosen to ignore the truth because she needed what Sebastian offered? Aurora laid Rose in her crib and retreated to the kitchen, where she sat at the small table, head in her hands. Her phone buzzed. Sebastian, checking in as he did every evening. She couldn't bring herself to answer. What would she say? How could she express the storm of emotions coursing through her? Pride had always been Aurora's shield. Growing up with little, she'd learned to hold her head high, to refuse handouts, to make do with what she had. When Rose's father left, that pride had sustained her through crushing heartbreak and fear. "We don't need anyone," she had whispered to her unborn child. "We'll make our own way." Yet Sebastian had slipped past those defenses, offering help in ways she could accept without feeling diminished. He had made her feel strong even when accepting his assistance. Or had that been an illusion? Had he simply been careful not to offend her pride while viewing her as a charity case all along? Aurora's phone buzzed again. Another text from Sebastian, likely concerned by her silence. She couldn't face him tonight, couldn't sort through these feelings, with him watching her expression, reading her hurt and confusion. Tomorrow she would have to confront him, to ask why he'd hidden such a significant part of himself. Tomorrow she would need to be strong, clear-headed, ready to hear his explanation. But tonight, alone in her kitchen with the weight of the day pressing down on her, Aurora allowed herself something rare, a moment of complete vulnerability, where the tears she'd been holding back all day finally broke free, and the fear that she had built her hopes on sand washed through her like a tide. Evening shadows stretched across Oak Lane as Sebastian's car pulled up to Aurora's cottage. Concern had been growing in his mind since her unusual silence that afternoon. Their text exchanges, normally frequent and warm, had gone quiet after his morning message. His calls had gone straight to voicemail. He'd spent the day in video conferences, barely paying attention to the business matters at hand as his thoughts kept returning to Aurora. The unusual silence felt significant, worrying. So he'd cut his last meeting short, stopped by Aurora's favorite Italian restaurant in the next town, over, and arrived at her door with a peace offering, though he wasn't sure what needed making peace. The lights were on in Aurora's house, soft yellow squares against the deepening twilight. Sebastian balanced the bag of takeout in one arm as he approached the door, rehearsing casual greetings in his mind. Nothing too pressing, nothing that would make her feel crowded if she simply needed space. His knuckles had barely left the door when it opened. Aurora stood before him, her expression guarded in a way he'd never seen. Her eyes, usually warm when they met his, now held a careful distance. She'd been crying. The slight redness around her eyes couldn't be hidden. "Aurora," he said, relief at seeing her mixing with new concern. "I was worried when I didn't hear from you today." She stepped back, allowing him entry without the usual smile or welcome. "Come in," she said, her voice controlled. Sebastian entered, immediately sensing the charged atmosphere. Rose was nowhere in sight, already asleep, he guessed, given the hour. The house felt different somehow, as if the familiar warmth had been replaced by something brittle and uncertain. "I brought dinner," he offered, lifting the bag. "From that Italian place you mentioned. I thought maybe you'd had a rough day or weren't feeling well." Aurora took the bag with a murmured thank you and set it on the kitchen counter without opening it. She turned to face him, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Is everything okay?" Sebastian asked, though he already knew the answer. Did something happen today? A flicker of emotion, hurt perhaps or frustration, crossed Aurora's face. "You could say that," she replied. "I had an interesting visitor this afternoon." Sebastian frowned, not understanding. "A visitor? Your assistant, Randall." Aurora watched his face carefully as comprehension dawned. "He was looking for you. Mentioned something about needing your signature for a multi-million-dollar acquisition for Davenport Industries." Sebastian felt the blood drain from his face. Of all the ways he'd imagined Aurora discovering the truth about his wealth and position, this ranked among the worst. Randall's well-intentioned visit had stripped away his careful approach, leaving the truth exposed in the most impersonal way possible. "Aurora, I can explain," he began, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "That's not all," she continued, her voice steady despite the emotion he could see building behind her eyes. By noon, the entire town knew. Everyone at the diner was talking about it. Sebastian Davenport, tech billionaire, slumming it in Sage Hollow. The last words carried a bitterness that made Sebastian wince. He took a step toward her, but stopped when she tensed. "That's not what this is," he said quietly. "That's never what this was." Aurora met his gaze directly, her vulnerability visible despite her attempt at composure. "Then what is it, Sebastian? And why didn't you tell me yourself?" Sebastian exhaled slowly, gathering his thoughts. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I've been trying to find the right moment." "The right moment?" Aurora's voice rose slightly. "We've spent nearly every day together for weeks. There were plenty of moments, Sebastian." He moved to the living room, needing to sit as the weight of the situation settled on him. "I know. You're right." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Aurora had come to recognize. "At first, I didn't tell you because we had just met. It seemed unnecessary to lead with, 'By the way, I run a tech company worth billions.' And later?" Aurora remained standing, maintaining the distance between them. "Later, I was afraid." The admission came quietly, surprising them both with its honesty. "I was afraid of how it would change things between us." Aurora's arms tightened across her chest. "You didn't trust me." "No," Sebastian corrected quickly. "I didn't trust the situation. My whole life, Aurora, people have treated me differently once they know about the money. Friends become opportunists, dates become gold diggers, family members become strangers with hands out." His voice carried years of disappointment. "But you treated me like a person, just Sebastian, not my bank account or my company or my influence. So you lied to me." The hurt in her voice was palpable. "I omitted." "I never directly lied," Sebastian countered, then immediately regretted the technicality. "I'm sorry. That's splitting hairs. You're right to be upset." Aurora finally sat, choosing the chair farthest from him. "Do you know what they're saying in town? That I'm your charity case, your small-town fling, that I somehow tricked you or trapped you or," her voice broke slightly, "or that I'm sleeping with you for money." Sebastian's face hardened with anger on her behalf. "That's ridiculous. Anyone who knows you would never believe that." "But they do believe it," Aurora insisted. "Because what else makes sense? Why else would someone like you spend time with someone like me?" "Someone like you?" Sebastian leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "You mean someone kind and strong and remarkable? Someone who works harder than anyone I've ever met? Someone who loves her daughter so fiercely it humbles me to witness it?" Aurora shook her head, tears threatening again. "You know what I mean. I'm a waitress, Sebastian. I live paycheck to paycheck in a house smaller than your guest bathroom probably is. I haven't finished college. I shop at thrift stores. None of that matters to me. It matters to the world." Aurora's voice rose with emotion. "There are lines drawn between people like you and people like me. Lines I've been painfully aware of my entire life. Lines you can pretend don't exist because you've always been on the right side of them." Sebastian absorbed the blow of her words, recognizing the truth in them even as they stung. "I never pretended with you, Aurora. Everything between us has been real." "How can I know that?" she asked, voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "How can I trust anything now? Maybe I was just an experiment in normality for you, a break from your real life." Sebastian stood, moved by a need to bridge the gap between them. "You and Rose are my real life, the most real thing I've found in years." He took another step toward her, but Aurora rose as well, maintaining the distance. "I'm falling in love with you," Sebastian confessed, the words escaping before he could consider them. "I have been almost since that first night. That's the truth I should have told you weeks ago." Aurora's eyes widened, tears finally spilling over. For a moment, Sebastian thought he'd reached her. Then she shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself protectively. "I need time," she whispered. "This is all too much. I need to think." Sebastian stopped his approach, respecting her request despite every instinct urging him to close the distance, to take her in his arms and make her believe his words. "Of course," he murmured. "I don't want to pressure you. I'll give you some space." The gulf between them felt wider than the physical distance, a chasm of misunderstanding and hurt that neither knew how to cross in this moment. Sebastian glanced at the forgotten takeout bag on the counter. "I'll leave this for you," he said softly. "It's your favorite fettuccine Alfredo, in case you want it later." The simple, thoughtful gesture, nearly undid Aurora's resolve. She managed a faint smile through her tears. "Thank you." Sebastian moved slowly toward the door, each step an exercise in restraint. He wanted to stay, to explain further, to somehow make her understand that. His feelings transcended any difference in their financial circumstances. But he recognized the need to respect her request for space. At the threshold, he paused, turning back with an expression full of longing and regret. "Aurora, please remember, nothing has changed about how I feel or who I am. I'm still the man who came to your door that night because he cared. That's the truest part of me." A tear rolled down Aurora's cheek. She nodded, unable to find words. With a last searching look, Sebastian left, closing the door softly behind him. The moment he was gone, Aurora sank onto the couch and sobbed quietly, trying not to wake Rose. Her heart felt split in two. She loved the man she'd gotten to know these past weeks. She hadn't fully admitted it until now, but his confession had echoed the truth in her own heart. Yet, she was terrified. Terrified that his world and hers might be incompatible, that she wasn't enough for someone like him, or that eventually he'd tire of her simple life and move back to his glittering one. Outside, Sebastian sat in his car, staring at Aurora's little house. The lights inside cast a warm glow that only emphasized his exclusion from that warmth. He pressed his forehead against the steering wheel, questioning every decision he'd made since meeting her. Should he have been honest sooner? Had he irreparably damaged her trust? With a heavy heart, he started the engine and drove away, leaving a piece of himself behind. Days passed in a strained silence. Aurora moved through her routines mechanically, feeding Rose, working shifts, at the diner, folding laundry, all while a persistent ache lived in her chest. The cottage felt emptier without Sebastian's warm presence, his deep laugh, his gentle way with Rose. Each night after Rose fell asleep, Aurora found herself checking her phone, reading old messages from Sebastian. He had respected her request for space, sending only one text, "I am here if you need me," to which she had replied simply, "I know. Thank you." The brevity of their exchange felt wrong after weeks of lengthy conversations. On the third evening of their separation, Aurora pulled out an old notebook from her bedside drawer. Inside were the letters she'd mentioned to Sebastian, her writings to her future partner, penned during lonely nights after Rose was bomb. With trembling fingers, she opened to a page dated 6 months ago, and to the one I haven't met yet. "I wonder who you'll be. Will you have kind eyes? Will you see me, really see me, not just as a mother, but as a woman with dreams of her own? Will you understand that Rose and I are a package deal, that loving me means loving her too? I hope you'll be patient. I hope you'll be honest. Most of all, I hope you'll love us for who we are, not who you wish we could be." Aurora's eyes filled with tears. Sebastian had been all those things. Kind, eyed, patient, seeing her completely. He had loved Rose, with a devotion that sometimes took her breath away. Was she pushing away exactly what she'd asked for because it came in an unexpected package? She flipped to another entry. "I don't need wealth or status. I've learned to live simply and find joy in small things. But I admit, I'm tired of struggling alone. I dream of shoulders strong enough to share my burdens, not take them away. Because they're mine to carry, but to make them lighter through partnership." Again, Sebastian's face came to mind. He had never tried to take over, never made her feel incapable. His help had always been offered with respect for her independence. The following morning, Aurora's phone rang while Rose napped. It was Travis, checking in as he did every few days. "You sound down, Rory," he said, using her childhood nickname. "What's going on?" The whole story spilled out, Sebastian's true identity, the town's reaction, her own confusion and hurt. Travis listened without interrupting. "So, let me get this straight," he finally said. "You're upset because the guy who's been amazing to you and Rose turns out to be rich? Most people would consider that winning the lottery." "It's not about the money," Aurora protested. "It's about him not telling me. Did you ever directly ask him what he does for a living? How much he makes?" Aurora paused. No, but… Look, sis, Travis's voice softened. I've never heard you sound as happy as you've been these past months. This guy clearly cares about you. If he's as good as you say, does the money really change anything between you two? Don't let other people's opinions steal your joy. His words struck a chord. Aurora had been happy, happier than she'd been in years. Was she really willing to sacrifice that happiness because of pride or fear? But what if we're too different? She whispered, voicing her deepest fear. What if eventually he realizes I don't fit into his world? Travis chuckled. From what you told me, he's the one who's been fitting into your life just fine. He's crazy about you and Rose. That's plain as day. If you love him, you gotta meet him halfway, Aurora. Don't let pride or fear keep you from something real. After hanging up, Aurora sat quietly, considering her brother's words. Was she making a mistake by keeping Sebastian at a distance? Was she letting fear of the unknown overshadow what she knew to be true about him? Sebastian stood at the window of his study, staring out at the manicured grounds of his estate. The house had never felt larger or emptier. Each room he entered seemed to echo with absence. No baby's laughter, no Aurora's warm voice. He had thrown himself into work, attending virtual meetings, reviewing contracts, making decisions worth millions, yet none of it held any satisfaction. His phone sat on his desk, silent. He'd promised Aurora space, and he intended to honor that promise, no matter how much it pained him. But the separation was taking its toll. He found himself driving by the diner, just to glimpse her through the window. Once, he'd seen her looking tired as she refilled coffee cups, and it had taken every ounce of restraint not to go inside. Randall had apologized profusely for the inadvertent revelation. I assumed Miss Evans knew, sir. I never meant to cause problems. It's not your fault, Sebastian had assured him. It's mine. I should have been honest with her from the beginning. That was the truth that kept him awake at night. Why hadn't he simply told Aurora who he was? Fear, yes. Fear of changing their dynamic, of seeing her pull back. But there had been pride, too. A certain satisfaction in being valued for himself rather than his wealth. He'd been selfish, protecting his own need for authentic connection at the cost of complete honesty. Sebastian poured himself a glass of water, ignoring the expensive bourbon. That had been his companion during too many lonely evenings. He needed clarity now, not numbing. He thought of Aurora's face when she'd asked for time, hurt, confused, yet still with that quiet dignity that had drawn him to her from the start. She deserved better than half-truths. She deserved a man who was completely transparent, who trusted her enough to share all aspects of his life. Sebastian moved to his desk and picked up a pen. If Aurora wouldn't speak to him yet, perhaps she would read his words. He began writing, pouring out everything he hadn't said, how his childhood had shaped his relationship with money, how fame had isolated him, how meeting her and Rose had awakened something he thought long dormant. He wrote about his mother, Rose, who had taught him that wealth meant nothing without connection. He explained how watching Aurora care for her daughter with such fierce love despite limited means had humbled and inspired him. When he finished the letter, Sebastian read it over, then set it aside. A letter wasn't enough. He needed to show Aurora that he was serious, that he saw a future with her and Rose that transcended their different backgrounds. An idea began to form, not a grand gesture of wealth, which would only reinforce the gap between them, but something meaningful that spoke to the heart of what they'd shared, something that would prove he understood her, respected her independence, and loved her completely for who she was. For the first time in days, Sebastian felt hope stir within him. He would give Aurora the time she needed, but when she was ready, he would be there, with honesty, humility, and a plan to bridge the worlds that separated them. A week after their painful conversation, dawn broke on an early spring morning with a sense of expectation in the air. Aurora had hardly slept, knowing that today she would see Sebastian. After much reflection and encouraged by Travis's advice, she had asked Sebastian if they could meet to talk. He had responded almost instantly, "Absolutely, anytime, anywhere. I'll be there." They agreed to meet at her mother's favorite spot, a little clearing. in Sage Hollow Park by a grove of willow trees, just after sunrise. Aurora chose that spot intentionally. It was where she often went to speak to her mother, in her thoughts, and where she had written many of her letters to her future soulmate. It felt right to have this heartfelt reunion in a place filled with personal meaning. Aurora arrived first, the grass dewy under her feet and the sky painted in pastel hues of pink and gold. The town was still asleep, and a gentle mist clung to the ground. Her heart pounded with a mix of nerves and hope. She cradled one of her handwritten letters in her hand, one she had written months ago, long before meeting Sebastian, yet every word in it resonated with what she now felt for him. In the quiet, she heard footsteps on the path. Sebastian emerged through the trees, looking as though he, too, had carried the weight of sleepless nights. His eyes found hers immediately. He approached slowly, almost reverently, as if afraid she might vanish. He was carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers, daisies, baby's breath, and a single red rose in the middle. Aurora felt tears prick her eyes at the sight of that rose. "Hi," she greeted softly. "Hi," he replied, equally soft. He offered her the bouquet. "These pale compared to you, but I wanted to bring something beautiful to someone beautiful." Aurora accepted the flowers, her hand brushing his as she did. "Thank you. They're lovely." For a moment, they just stood there, the cool morning air around them, hearts full of unspoken words. Finally, Aurora took a deep breath and began, voice trembling slightly. "Sebastian, I'm sorry for how I reacted. I was overwhelmed, and I let my fear get the better of me. You didn't deserve that." Sebastian shook his head. "You don't have to apologize. I'm the one who should be sorry for not being fully honest sooner. I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," Aurora said, meeting his eyes earnestly. "I know that now. And I want you to know, everything you feared, that I'd treat you differently, I won't. I don't care about your money or your title. I care about the man who held my baby when she cried, who fixed leaky faucets in my house without being asked, who listens to me and makes me laugh. That's the man I fell in love with." Her voice caught, tears spilling over as she finally confessed the truth held in her heart. Sebastian's eyes shone, and he took a step closer, gently cupping her face between his hands. "Aurora," he whispered, his own voice unsteady. "I love you. I have from nearly the moment I met you. I think even before I fully realized it, my heart knew. You and Rose are what I never knew I was searching for." Aurora let out a shaky laugh of relief, fresh tears running down her cheeks, but these of joy. "I love you too," she breathed. Sebastian smiled, a radiant, transformative smile that chased the worry from his face. Very slowly, he leaned in and pressed his forehead to hers, as if sealing a silent promise. Aurora closed her eyes, savoring the closeness. After a tender moment he spoke, voice gentle. "There's something I want to share with you. Something I should have told you earlier." He drew back slightly to look into her eyes. "The night you first texted me, when you told me your baby's name Rose, it felt like fate. My mother's name was Rose." Aurora's lips parted in surprise. "Your mother?" He nodded, a poignant softness in his expression. "She died when I was 15. My family didn't have much then. She's the reason I do so much of what I do. To hear that your little girl carried her name, I took it as a sign that I was meant to answer your message, that I was meant to meet you." Aurora brought a hand to her heart, moved by the revelation. "Oh, Sebastian, that's beautiful. I had no idea. I thought of telling you a dozen times. I even visited Mom's grave after I met you to tell her about you and Rose. I like to think she had a hand in guiding me to you that night." Aurora felt a gentle breeze pick up, rustling the willow branches overhead. And she too sensed their mother's blessings in that quiet. "I believe it," she whispered. "Sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways." Sebastian noticed the folded paper she held. He nodded toward it. "What's that?" Aurora flushed slightly, remembering her purpose. "It's one of the letters I wrote, the ones I told you about, to my future soulmate." She looked down bashfully. "I wrote this before I knew you, but when I reread it recently, it was like I had been writing about you all along." Sebastian's eyes widened with interest. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the letter. Aurora's fingers trembled as she offered it to him. "I want you to have it." He accepted the letter gingerly. "May I read it?" She nodded. "Yes." He unfolded the paper with care. Aurora's neat handwriting filled the page. As he read silently, Aurora observed him, how his eyes moved over her words, widening slightly, then growing misty. A couple of times his lips parted, as if the sentiments surprised him. When he finished, he looked up at her, emotion etched on his face. "Aurora, this." He struggled for words, then gently cleared his throat and read aloud. A line that struck him deeply. "I dream of a partner who will hold my child in his arms and love her as his own, who will see my broken pieces and help me build something beautiful out of them." He stepped forward, voice soft but firm as he continued. "I will love Rose as my own. I will cherish every piece of you, broken or whole, and together we'll build something so beautiful that neither of us has to be broken anymore." Aurora let out a small sob, a mix of joy and release, and threw her arms around him. Sebastian wrapped her in a tight embrace, both of them holding on as if they never intended to let go again. They stayed like that under the willow trees as the sun rose higher, painting them in golden light. It felt as though the past and future had merged in that embrace, every hardship that had led them here, every hope they dared to harbor, culminating in this perfect moment of understanding and love. After a time, Sebastian pulled back just enough to gaze into Aurora's face. He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "There's one more thing," he said, a tender excitement in his tone. From the pocket of his jacket, he retrieved a small velvet box. Aurora's breath caught as he eased down to one knee on the grass. Her hands flew to her mouth in astonishment. Sebastian looked up at her with adoration. "Aurora Evans, I know this may seem fast, but when you know, you know. I've had a bit of time to think this week, and I realized I don't want to waste another day not showing you how committed I am to you and Rose. Aurora and Sebastian have been through so much in just 3 months, from a wrong number text to falling deeply in love. But is 3 months too soon for a proposal? Some say when you know, you know, while others believe you need years to truly understand a person. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you say yes to someone after knowing them for only 3 months? He opened the box, revealing a delicate ring, a white gold band with a small cluster of diamonds, forming a rose shape, a sparkling homage to the name that bound them all together. The early sunlight made it glisten. Aurora's eyes brimmed with tears of joy and shock as he continued, voice shaking with emotion. "You have taught me what true wealth really is. It's not money or things, it's love, family, and moments like this. You and Rose are my treasure. Will you marry me, Aurora, and allow me to be a father to Rose, and love and protect you both for all my days?" For a heartbeat, Aurora was overcome, her voice lost in the surge of happiness. She nodded vigorously, then managed to find her words, voice quavering, "Yes." "Oh my gosh, yes!" Sebastian exhaled a breath he'd been holding, breaking into a grin that sent Aurora's heart soaring. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, then rose to his feet. Aurora threw her, arms around his neck, and he lifted her off the ground slightly as they laughed and cried at the same time. Setting her down gently, Sebastian cupped her face and finally, closed the distance between them in a soft, loving kiss. Aurora felt warmth bloom through her entire being. This kiss was everything. Sweet and gentle, a promise and a homecoming all at once. She kissed him back, her hands resting on his chest where she could feel the strong, fast beat of his heart matching hers. When they parted, both were smiling through happy tears. Aurora touched her forehead to his, noses brushing affectionately. "I never imagined a wrong number would lead me to the right person," she whispered. Sebastian chuckled softly, joy lighting up his face. "The best mistake I've ever made," he agreed. They spent a few more precious minutes in that clearing, savoring their newfound happiness as the world around them warmed with morning light. Eventually, hand in hand, they walked back out of the park. There was much to do, introducing Sebastian officially to a very important little girl sharing the news with. family and friends, and planning for a future that now stretched bright and full of promise before them. As they went, Aurora squeezed Sebastian's hand and said, "I believe my mom would have loved you." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to it. "I'll make sure to thank her someday for raising such an incredible woman and somehow guiding me to send that one fateful text." Aurora laughed lightly, leaning her head against his arm. "Well, technically, I sent the text, and I'm so very glad you did," he replied, his voice brimming with gratitude. Together they headed towards the sweet little cottage on Oak Lane, no longer three separate souls, a lonely man, a struggling woman, and her child, but a family in the making, ready to face the world side by side. The rising sun chased away the last of the dawn mist, illuminating their path. It truly was a new dawn, a beginning of a life filled with love, hope, and the unshakable bond born from one kind act and two open hearts. Later that morning, as Sebastian cradled a delighted Rose, who seemed to instinctively recognize him as someone special, Aurora found herself watching them with a heart so full it nearly overflowed. Sebastian was teaching Rose a clapping game, and the baby's giggles filled the cottage with joy. "She remembers you," Aurora said softly. Sebastian looked up, his expression tender. "I missed her, missed you both more than I can say." Aurora sat beside them, running her finger over the beautiful ring. On her hand, still feeling surreal, like a dream she might wake from. "I reread all my letters this week," she confessed. "The ones to my future partner. It was like I had been writing to you all along, without even knowing you existed." "May I read them someday?" Sebastian asked. "Not all at once, perhaps. Maybe one on special occasions, anniversaries, milestones." Aurora nodded, touched by the suggestion. "I'd like that." Rose reached for Aurora, and Sebastian gently transferred the baby to her mother's arms. As he watched them together, he said, "You know, I was thinking about your dream to study marine biology." Aurora looked up, surprised he remembered that detail from their park conversation. "I know a few people connected with the Marine Research Center at the university," he continued. "If you wanted to finish your degree someday, when Rose is a bit older perhaps." Aurora's eyes widened. "You'd support that?" "I'd support anything that matters to you," Sebastian replied simply. "Your dreams don't stop mattering because you're a mother or a wife." He said the last word with a smile that made her heart skip. In that moment, Aurora knew with absolute certainty that the letter she'd shared with Sebastian had found its intended recipient, the partner she'd been writing to all along, before she even knew his name. Morning sunshine gilded the streets of Sage Hollow as Aurora and Sebastian made their way back to Oak Lane, hands intertwined, Aurora's new ring catching light with each step. The town was waking now, shopkeepers sweeping sidewalks, early risers collecting newspapers, and more. Then one neighbor did a double take at the sight of the couple, faces radiant with newfound joy. "We're going to be the talk of the town all over again," Aurora said with a small laugh, noticing Mrs. Henderson's undisguised stare from her front porch. Sebastian squeezed her hand. "Let them talk. This time, we have nothing to hide." They walked slowly, neither wanting to rush this moment. Aurora looked up at the man who would soon be her husband, still hardly believing the morning's events. "So, where will we live?" she asked, the practical question emerging amid her happiness. Sebastian considered before answering. "Wherever makes you happiest. We could stay at your place or mine, or find somewhere new altogether." "I love my little cottage," Aurora admitted, "but it's awfully small for 3 people. What about a compromise?" Sebastian suggested. "We could renovate your place, expand it a bit, keep its character, but make it more comfortable for us all." Aurora's eyes brightened at the thought. "You wouldn't mind living in a cottage when you have that beautiful estate?" "Aurora," Sebastian said gently, "that estate has never felt like home. It's just a house with expensive furniture. Home is where you and Rose are." She leaned against his shoulder as they walked, heart full. "We'll need to think about schools for Rose eventually. And maybe a home office for you. And a study space for you," Sebastian added, "when you decide to pursue your marine biology courses." Aurora looked up at him, seeing how earnestly he included her dreams in their future plans. "You really mean that, don't you?" "Every word," he promised. "Your goals matter as much as mine." They turned onto Oak Lane, the morning quiet except for birdsong. "I never thought I could have this," Aurora confessed. "A partner who believes in me. A father for Rose. A future without constant worry." Sebastian brought their joined hands to his lips. "Believe it, this is just the beginning." As they approached Aurora's cottage, Mrs. Garcia emerged from her house next door, Rose in her arms. The elderly neighbor had been watching the baby while Aurora met Sebastian. "Look who's back, pequeña," Mrs. Garcia cooed to Rose, pointing toward Aurora and Sebastian. Rose, dressed in a yellow onesie with tiny ducks printed on it, immediately began, bouncing in Mrs. Garcia's arms, her little hands reaching out eagerly. Her face lit up with a gummy smile of pure delight, not just at seeing her mother, but at recognizing Sebastian. "Ba, ba, ba," Rose exclaimed, her version of excited babbling reserved for people she loved. Sebastian's eyes grew misty as Aurora took Rose from Mrs. Garcia, thanking her neighbor for the early morning childcare. When Aurora turned toward him, Rose immediately lunged in his direction, nearly tumbling from her mother's arms in her enthusiasm. "Someone missed you," Aurora said softly, transferring the squirming baby to Sebastian's waiting arms. Rose patted Sebastian's cheeks with her tiny hands, examining his face. With serious concentration, before breaking into another brilliant smile, she settled against his chest with complete trust, as if she'd found her rightful place. "Hello, sweet Rose," Sebastian whispered, holding her securely. "I missed you too." Aurora watched them, this man and her daughter forming their own bond independent of her, a connection built on genuine love rather than obligation. In Rose's innocent acceptance, Aurora saw the final piece of their family fall perfectly into place. 3 months later, on a bright summer afternoon, the small town of Sage Hollow gathered in the flower, adorned backyard of the old Granger estate, now the Davenport family's cherished country home. Laughter and cheerful chatter filled the air as neighbors, friends, and family celebrated a very special day. White wooden chairs formed neat rows on the emerald lawn, leading to a gazebo draped in ivy and roses. Wildflowers lined the aisle, the same varieties Sebastian had brought Aurora the morning of their reconciliation. Instead of formal decorations, handwritten notes from well-wishers hung from nearby trees, fluttering like leaves in the gentle breeze. The transformation of the estate mirrored the transformation of the town's perception. The once imposing property now felt welcoming and warm, much like the evolution of Sebastian and Aurora's relationship in the public eye. Where once there had been whispers of doubt and speculation, today there were only smiles of genuine happiness for the couple. Aurora stood inside the house, peering through the window at the gathering. Her simple ivory gown flowed to her ankles, elegant without ostentation. She had chosen it herself from a boutique in the city after Sebastian insisted she select whatever made her feel most beautiful. "No price tags," he'd said, and for once, Aurora hadn't argued. Her brother Travis approached, Rose in his arms. The nearly 1-year-old baby wore a frilly dress that matched Aurora's, a tiny floral crown nestled in her dark curls. "Ready, sis?" Travis asked, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Sebastian's waiting, and I think half the town might burst with anticipation." Aurora laughed, taking her daughter into her arms. "They've all been invested in our story from the beginning, whether we wanted them to be or not." Small towns, Travis nodded knowingly. Can't live with the gossip, can't live without the casseroles when times get tough. Outside, familiar faces filled every seat. Monica from the diner sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes already though the ceremony hadn't begun. Mrs. Garcia, Aurora's elderly neighbor, wore her Sunday best, her weathered face radiant with joy. Even Diane Foster, who had once questioned Aurora's motives, sat primly in the middle section, her expression softened by the undeniable romance of the occasion. As the simple string quartet began to play, Aurora took a deep breath. "It's time," she whispered to Rose, who reached for her mother's cheek with a gentle pat, as if offering encouragement. Sebastian stood beneath the gazebo, handsome in a tailored suit that somehow didn't overshadow his natural warmth. Beside him stood his best man, Randall, whose accidental revelation had nearly derailed their relationship, but ultimately strengthened it. Sebastian's eyes never left the house entrance, waiting for his first glimpse of his bride. When Aurora appeared with Rose in her arms and Travis at her side, a collective sigh rose from the guests. Sebastian's face transformed with wonder and love, his eyes filling with tears he made no attempt to hide. Step by step, Aurora approached him, carrying their future in her arms. Pastor Mike, who had watched Aurora grow from child to woman to mother, welcomed everyone with a warm smile. "We gather today to celebrate not just a union between two people, but the formation of a family," he began. "A family born from the most unlikely of circumstances, a wrong number that turned out to be exactly right." Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. For their vows, Sebastian and Aurora had chosen to write their own. Sebastian spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion evident on his face. "Aurora, before you and Rose, I had success but not joy, wealth but not richness, a house but not a home." He reached out to touch Rose's cheek gently. "You two taught me what matters most. I vow to spend every day earning the trust you've placed in me, honoring the family we're creating, and remembering that the greatest fortune in my life is standing right here before me." Aurora handed Rose to Travis for a moment, then took Sebastian's hands in hers. "Sebastian," she began, her voice catching slightly before finding strength. "You came to my door at my lowest moment and lifted me up without making me feel small. You loved my daughter as your own from the first moment. You saw me, not just as a mother, not just as someone who needed help, but as a woman with dreams and worth." She squeezed his hands. "I vow to partner with you in all things, to build our life on honesty and trust, and to remind you every day that true wealth is measured in moments of love, not numbers in an account." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience as they exchanged rings. Hers, the rose-shaped cluster he'd proposed, with his, a simple platinum band engraved inside with the words, "Wrong number, right love." When Pastor Mike pronounced them husband and wife, Sebastian cupped Aurora's face with infinite tenderness and kissed her. Rose, now back in Travis's arms, clapped her tiny hands in delight, prompting laughter through tears from the assembled guests. In that perfect moment, under the summer sky, all of Sage Hollow witnessed what true love looked like. Not a fairy tale of rescue, but a partnership of equals, brought together by fate and cemented by choice. The reception unfolded across the estate's gardens, where tables draped in white linen hosted clusters of guests enjoying the celebration. Children chased butterflies across the lawn, while elders reminisced in the shade of ancient oaks. The atmosphere was one of relaxed joy, exactly as Aurora and Sebastian had wanted, formal enough to honor the occasion, casual enough that everyone felt welcome. In a charming touch that reflected both Aurora's creativity and Sebastian. His resources, each table featured centerpieces created by local artisans, pottery from the high school art program, flower arrangements from Mrs. Harrington's garden club, handcrafted wooden vases from Walter's hardware workshop. Each piece came with a card explaining its origin and the story of its creator. "It's not like any billionaire wedding I've ever seen," whispered Tina to another diner waitress watching. Sebastian helped an elderly guest to her seat with the same attentiveness he might show a corporate CEO. "That's because it's not about being a billionaire wedding," Monica replied, overhearing. "It's about being their wedding." Near the garden's center stood a unique feature that had guests approaching with curiosity and leaving with emotion. A large table bore a sign, "In gratitude, kindness given, kindness shared." On it were gift bags for each guest, small tokens and handwritten thank you notes from Aurora, expressing how each person's kindness, from Mrs. Garcia's moral support to Monica's flexible shifts at the diner, had helped her when she was struggling. Sebastian had added something extra to each note, a pledge that Davenport Industries would donate generously to the town's community center and establish a fund to support single parents in the area. It was the couple's way of paying forward the kindness that had brought them together. Aurora watched as a few single mothers from town, who had been invited as special guests, opened their envelopes with surprise and relief. Some had tears, realizing their burdens would be a little lighter thanks to this fund. Aurora's heart swelled with purpose and gratitude. She caught Sebastian's eye across the lawn, and they shared a smile that spoke volumes. They would never forget where they came from, and they would strive to be the same beacon for others that fate, and their own hearts, had been for them. The reception continued with dancing on a wooden floor set up beneath string lights. Sebastian led Aurora in their first dance to a song they'd chosen together, not a traditional wedding ballad, but the lullaby Sebastian had hummed to Rose the night they met, now arranged for string quartet. "That's Brahms's lullaby," Mrs. Moore, a former music teacher, identified it for her table companions. How perfectly fitting. As Sebastian held Aurora close, guiding her in gentle circles, he whispered, "My mother used to sing this to me. Now it belongs to all three of us." Later, Travis rose to give a toast, balancing Rose on his hip. "To my sister, who has always been the strongest person I know, and to Sebastian, who had the wisdom to recognize her strength rather than try to replace it." He raised his glass. "And to little Rose, who somehow managed to find herself the perfect parents." Sebastian then took the microphone, surprising Aurora. "I'd like to announce something special," he said, drawing her to his side. "In honor of our wedding, we're establishing the Rose Davenport Foundation for Single Parents. It will provide educational scholarships, childcare assistance, and emergency support for families in need, beginning here in Sage Hollow and eventually expanding nationwide." Aurora looked up at him in wonder as applause erupted. "You didn't tell me," she whispered. "I wanted it to be a surprise," he replied softly. "It's named after both our mothers, the women who taught us what real strength looks like." As afternoon mellowed into evening, the celebration continued with cake, cutting, more dancing, and the easy mingling of guests from different worlds. Sebastian's corporate colleagues chatting with Aurora's diner, regulars, city friends exchanging recipes with town matriarchs. What struck everyone most was how perfectly the couple complemented each other. Sebastian's resources matched with Aurora's heart, his vision with her practicality, his worldliness with her groundedness. Together, they created something neither could have built alone, a bridge between worlds that benefited everyone it touched. As twilight fell and fireflies began to twinkle in the warm evening air, Sebastian pulled Aurora aside for a quiet moment. With Rose snoozing in Travis's arms for a bit, they strolled hand in hand through the garden. "Think back to that night," Sebastian murmured, pressing a kiss to Aurora's temple. "Could you have ever imagined it would lead here?" Aurora leaned her head against his shoulder, smiling as she remembered the frightened woman she was, texting a plea in the dark. "Not in my wildest dreams," she replied. "I was just hoping for a bit of baby formula, and I found a partner for life. I found a family," Sebastian said softly, wrapping an arm around her waist. Aurora looked up at the first stars peeking out. "My mother used to tell me that we're given second chances in life if we open our hearts. I think I finally understand what she meant." Sebastian nodded. "Your courage to ask for help set everything in motion. You taught me that showing vulnerability isn't a weakness, but a strength. It brought us together, and your kindness changed our lives," Aurora added, touching his wedding ring, which glinted in the soft light. "You had every reason to ignore a random message, but you didn't. You reminded me that there are good people in this world willing to help purely out of compassion." They shared a gentle kiss, both silently thanking the twist of fate that united them. Nearby, Rose gave a little sleepy cry, and they turned to see Travis walking toward them with a grin. "Someone's asking for Mom and Dad," he teased, using the new titles playfully. Aurora's eyes met Sebastian's, and they both felt a warmth at being called Mom and Dad, a family indeed. They walked back to join Travis. Sebastian scooped Rose into his arms, and the baby settled instantly against his chest with a content sigh. Aurora wrapped an arm around Sebastian as they stood together, looking around at the love and happiness that filled their home. In that moment, she felt the presence of her mother and his, and all the blessings that had led them here. Life had not turned out at all how she once feared. It was far better. She had learned that kindness from a stranger can blossom into the purest love, that accepting help can lead to healing, and that true love isn't about money or status, but about caring, sacrifice, and showing up for each other every single day. Sebastian, in turn, had learned that opening his heart and humbly seeing people for who they are brought him the family and happiness he'd always secretly longed for. Under the canopy of stars, as music and laughter floated around them, Aurora reached up and whispered into Sebastian's ear, "Thank you for replying to my text." He chuckled softly, holding her and their daughter close. "Thank you for sending it." Their eyes met, full of understanding and devotion, and together with Rose, they looked toward the horizon. The past was behind them, and a bright future, rich not in money alone but in love, family, and community, awaited. It was a future they would greet with open arms, forever grateful for the mistaken message. That changed everything, and the love that proved strong enough to bridge any gap. And so, the poor single mom and the lonely billionaire found in each other what they had been missing: a second chance at family, a love beyond measure, and the beautiful proof that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can ignite a lifetime of happiness. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Mr. Roman's Story Vault for more heartwarming tales of unexpected love, second chances, and the beautiful moments that change lives forever. Hit that notification bell to never miss an upload, and let me know in the comments which part of Aurora and Sebastian's journey resonated with you most.